made me a better EMS medical director. So I'd love to be able to kind of have those kind of cool talks with you too. Okay, good. Thank you.
Good morning. Oops. Good morning. Is it on? Aerosol. So technical. Good morning. I'd like to ask everyone to take their seat. Well, Commissioner Kidd was here and he was the last to arrive, but now he's gone. So he's gone. Okay, oh, we're good. This morning I'd like to, on behalf of the Randolph County Board of Commissioners, I'd like to welcome you here this morning. This is a very special day. I believe it's the first time that our Board of County Commissioners has ever called a meeting of the county's elected officials and other key leadership to discuss a topic that has such an impact on our nation, our state, and our county. The issue is prescription opioid abuse, the alarming use of heroin, and the related behavioral problems associated with this epidemic that has affected our families, our communities, our health and emergency services, law enforcement, schools, and so many other organizations that impact our public's health, safety, and well-being. Thank you for those, their attendants from across our county who are here to learn about this critical issue, including interested citizens from all over our county and our other representatives. We'd also like to specially welcome the North Carolina Association of County Commissioners, immediate past president Fred McClure, who has spearheaded statewide meetings such as this. Fred, would you like to come and say a few words? Fred is a county commissioner over in neighboring Davidson County as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, you folks know how to put on a meeting. We had our pilot meeting, and a pilot, when that means pilot, was a pilot because we didn't have anything to go on. We didn't have any ground plans. We didn't have anything, so we just put it all together. We had 70 people show up, and we thought we was doing some kind of a job. I am Fred McClure. I'm the immediate past president. Last August, whenever I was elected, my initiative was substance abuse, primarily opioids. And it was really not in the limelight at that time, and not in the eye of the press or anybody else. Later on, the State Secretary of DHSS got aboard, Attorney General got aboard, now the President has got aboard. I meant to send them thank you letters for getting aboard of my initiative, but folks, there is nothing at all that you can do in this county that will make a bigger impact than what you're looking at today. Now, there's going to be a bunch of you folks go home, and next week this will just be a memory. But I implore you to get together, to make this work, to get a plan. Because, let me tell you something. The federal government can throw money out here, and the state government can pass a regulation every now and then, but the people that are going to make the difference sit in this room and live in these counties. And your county commissioners have been forward-thinking enough to get the people together that's going to make the difference in this county. And my best wishes to you, because there's just nothing, just curious, how many of you know someone or has someone in your family that has passed because of addiction? Look around. It doesn't affect just teenagers. It affects middle-aged and old folks like me. It affects everybody. It affects everybody. So make a difference in your county. And I appreciate you allowing me time to say a couple of words. Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Thank you. due to the number of folks that we have here, I won't go around and have everyone introduce themselves, but would like to recognize various groups that are here. So if you'd either, I'd like for you to stand, if you would, as I call your kind of group, and you may be in 2 or 3 different groups. But those representatives of state government, if you work in state government, elected official, I saw Senator Tillman, if you'd stand. I just want to kind of get a feel for the folks that are in this meeting. So there's our folks from the state. Our municipalities, I saw several mayors and council members, aldermen and whatnot. If you would stand, just let some people see who is here. Thank y'all for coming. The judicial system, those folks that work in our courts, we've got a couple folks, Scott back there. Appreciate y'all being here. Randolph County, Ashburn City, charter schools, anyone in education, including RCC. I saw Dr. Bob Shackford here earlier. Thank y'all for being here. Kind of give you representation. Law enforcement agencies, those of you in law enforcement, I believe we've got some in the back over there, police department, sheriff's offices. Thank you. So to begin this morning's agenda, I'd like to introduce our county manager, Hal Johnson. Hal recently coordinated the completion of our county strategic process, which helped emphasize our community's shared interest in solutions. And Hal will introduce our and moderate today's program. So Hal, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And wow, you sit here and you look out at all of us that work in so many different areas of this community. You can just feel the energy in this room this morning. I want to thank all of you for spending your morning with us today to talk about this critical issue. Before we start, I want to thank the Randolph County Sheriff's Department. And in the back there, you see Officer Adam Profifi. I think I butchered his name, but he understands that. But the Sheriff's Department now has a new capability of recording and videotaping programs and public service announcements. And as we speak, and the program this morning is being broadcast live on our Facebook channels. It will be recorded and available for citizens to go back at other times and review what's being talked about this morning, because the whole process this morning is education. It's talking about these issues and putting it into a context of Randolph County. So thank you, Sheriff, and thank you to your staff back there that is making the recording of this live broadcast possible. All of you at your tables, you have a copy of the agenda that we'll be going through this morning. You also have another sheet there where you can make comments or suggestions or thoughts. And I encourage you to do that. If you would, as the meeting progresses and different speakers are talking about different topics, please write down some of your thoughts that you would like for us to know. And we'll gather those up at the end of the meeting, and we'll our Department of Public Health will put all that together, and we'll have a good feeling what your impressions are as we go through this morning's agenda. We're going to be talking about, as you can see from the agenda, several different topics. We're going to look at the scope of the opioid problem in Randolph County. We're going to try to have begin an understanding of the psychology of addiction and opioid overuse. We're going to look at how opioid misuse affects emergency services in Randolph Hospital, Randolph Health. We're going to look at its impacts on law enforcement and our court system. And we're going to look at the ongoing impacts to social service programs and to our school systems. And we're going to also have a look at it from a pharmacy standpoint, a perspective of a pharmacist with the opioid problem. In addition to this, we're going to have 3 personal testimonies from citizens whose families have been so directly impacted by opioid abuse. We'll try to put a face on what we're talking about this morning. And to begin the agenda, I'm going to introduce Susan Hayes. Susan is the Director of the Department of Public Health. When you think of county government and you look around and you see law enforcement, emergency services, Public Health Department impacts every citizen in this county every single day in one way or the other. And I'm very glad to introduce Susan Hayes now as our Director of Public Health, and she will talk about the opioid problem as it really is here in Randolph County. Thank you.
Good morning. I was good till Hal reminded me this was like live. So my job this morning is to sort of bring us up to date as to where we are in Randolph County with our opioid situation. To begin with, I wanted to just touch on, exactly what an opioid is. We're going to be talking about this the rest of the morning, and I feel like I need to sort of set the stage so going forward we kind of know where we are. Opioids are typically, historically, opium is the drug that is derived from a certain kind of poppy plant. From opium, we get morphine, heroin, Vicodin, Percocet, Oxycontin, Oxycodone, and others. Any of those drugs sound familiar to y'all? Many of us have been prescribed these medications if we've had surgery, if we've had dental procedures, if we've had an injury of some kind. We've probably either had them in our medicine cabinet or have them in our medicine cabinet right now. Synthetic opiates are methadone, fentanyl, and carfentanil, and many others. These are man-made opiates. We've gotten really well versed in how to wiggle them around chemically, and so there's lots of different analogs now as far as synthetic opiates go. So how bad is this problem? Well, it's pretty bad. In the United States, overdose is the leading cause of death for Americans under 50. Every day in North Carolina, 3 people die from an opiate overdose. Drug overdoses are the leading cause of accidental death in Randolph County. So more than any other cause of accidental deaths is overdose death. And in 2015, we had 97 accidental deaths from all intents. So car crashes, violence, machinery accidents, whatever kind of accident you can think of. 32% of those all-cause intents were related to an opioid overdose. Randolph County is, North Carolina is divided up into 10 health department regions. And we are in Region 5, and that is, you can see that in the outline there. We're that red star. And in our region, we have 9 counties. Our counties are Alamance, Orange, Chatham, Caswell, Durham, Guilford, Person, Randolph, and Rockingham. So we have some fairly large counties in our region. If you look at Durham and Guilford, very diverse counties as well. Chatham and Orange, I think, are very diverse in particular. When you look at what we're looking at right now is the rate of medication and drug overdose deaths by county from 2013 to 2015. You can see that for Randolph County, our rate was 19.2. In our region, it was 10.2. In North Carolina, it was 13.5. So we're winning the blue ribbon there. Also, this is deaths. I took certain years over between 2001 and 2015, and I'm using 2015 right now because that is the most recent data that the state would give me that was ordained, I guess. They are getting ready to release more recent data, but they would not give that to me, obviously, because they need to release that themselves. But if you notice, I've got counties over on the left-hand side. Under each county is our population. In 2001, we had 5 overdose deaths. In 2015, we had 30. That's pretty big. Look at Mecklenburg County. They have a population of over 1 million people. Compare their death rates to ours. And the same thing with Alamance and Guilford. Now, Alamance and Guilford are in our region, and we're very similar in terms of population to Alamance. We are a little different when we look at health disparities and the population as a whole, but I think it's fairly significant for Randolph County to have had 30 deaths when we've got other counties with larger populations, and we're not far behind them. Overdose deaths by intent. People die unintentionally. That's what this slide shows you. All intents is that top black line. The next line is accidental. That is unintentional death. So when people die from opioids, they die unintentionally. It was not their intention to overdose. When we look at self-inflicted overdoses, they have remained steady across the board. They don't rise. For years and years, they have remained steady. And all these are Randolph County slides too. Let me be sure you understand. I'm not talking about North Carolina. I'm not talking about the region when I'm looking at these slides. In Randolph County, substances that contribute to unintentional medication or drug overdose deaths from 1999 to 2015, number 1 is prescription opiates. Number 2 is heroin. And number 3 is synthetic opioids, and we're beginning to see more and more of the synthetic opioids as well. And the speakers following me are going to really delve into the things where I'm talking about right now. So this is just a precursor of what you're going to hear after me. There's costs associated with overdose, and these are estimated medical costs and total lifetime costs for unintentional fatalities. And we can see that in Randolph County we have, and there's way more costs than this. This is just on the individual level. The cost to our county and our society as a whole is tremendous. This data is as of 2017, June, so this is fairly recent. I want to mention, because we'll hear more about this, this is a slide that we're looking at the number of pharmacies under standing order by county. And naloxone is a drug that is an antidote to opiates. That is the purpose of naloxone. In June of 2016, the state health director issued a state standing order so that pharmacies could have available naloxone for anyone who came in and said, I need it for my own personal use, I have a family member who needs it, I have a friend who needs it. No questions asked. They don't have to have a prescription. They just say, I need it, and they pay for it, and they're good. Right now, we have 18 pharmacies that are offering naloxone under standing order. In our region, there's 193. We need more pharmacies willing to do that. When we look at the number of reversals in our county, and when I'm saying reversals, when a person overdoses, naloxone is used to bring them out of that overdose, and that is the reversal. In our county, from 2013 to 2017, so, you know, that's several years, we had 128. It's, in our region, 1,765. There were more than 6,000 opioid overdose reversals reported by the North Carolina Harm Reduction Coalition in North Carolina since 2013. Law enforcement is beginning to carry naloxone, and in our region, you can kind of see by the map, the darker the color, the more reversals by naloxone from a law enforcement officer. I split this slide into two because it was so busy. Right now, we don't have any law enforcement agencies that are carrying naloxone. I think we're beginning to see more and more interest in that. In our region, there are 53 who carry it, and 53 reversals, thank you. And there were 19 agencies in our region that were carrying it. Across North Carolina, there's 137 law enforcement agencies that are carrying naloxone. This slide shows that when we look at Randolph County, the bigger the circle, the more prescription drugs were dispensed between 2011 and 2015. The darker the county, the more deaths. So you can see in our county, we dispensed a lot of, from 2011 to 2015, we dispensed a lot of prescription opiates, and we had a lot of deaths. And you can kind of see where those same comparison of where that's occurring in other places across the state. There's a direct correlation, when you look at that, there's a direct correlation between the amount of opiates dispensed and the number of overdoses. This is a comparison. This is also 2015 data, but I thought it was pretty remarkable when you look at the number of prescriptions. In Randolph County, there is almost 90 pills. In 2015, there were almost 90 pills per person. That's man, woman, and child, infants, everybody. Almost 90 pills for everybody per person in our county. So if you were a family of 3, you could have 270 pills sitting in your cabinet. When you look at Mecklenburg County, Guilford County, Davidson County, we're leading the pack there. This data comes from SAMHSA, and it shows in Randolph County what kind of treatment facilities we have, or the availability. This is an access to care thing. We've got substance abuse treatment centers in Randolph County. Right now we have 7. We have no opioid treatment programs in Randolph County, none. Now remember, I said we have a problem. People are dying, they need treatment, and treatment saves lives. We don't have anywhere for them to go. They can go to Greensboro, but how many folks do you know have transportation issues? A lot. So no treatment center here is a problem. Methadone assisted therapy is a gold standard for treatment. There's no treatment programs here. Substance abuse treatment facilities in our region, there's 87, and opioid treatment programs, there's 5. And this is, again, this is SAMHSA data, so if they've not updated their data, then this may not be completely accurate. The bottom line is that overdose deaths are preventable, and June 2017, the governor issued the North Carolina's Opioid Action Plan. There are a number of strategies that we can involve ourselves in across our county. One of those strategies is a very coordinated infrastructure to look at developing plans and strategies to prevent overdose deaths. We have one of those in our county, a coordinated effort, and it's called our Randolph County Opioid Community Collaborative. We meet regularly. We started in February with just a few partners, the Sheriff's Office, EMS, Project Lazarus, the hospital, Randolph Health, and we have grown to more than 30 partners since January. And if you're interested in participating in this, please let me know. I will be glad to add you to our list, but I think together we can come up with solutions to address our problem. Thank you.
Catherine Davis is a risk management professional, and she serves as the risk manager for Randolph County government. She's received advanced training in the management of environmental safety and health in the public sector, and her duty is to help ensure a safe workplace for county staff and the citizens that interact with the county conducting the public's business. Awareness and attention to detail is a special strength of Catherine Davis. However, when the tragedy of opioid addiction impacted her family, she was unprepared for the challenges that she and her family would endure.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I apologize that I'm going to be reading this. I already feel this is the first time that I've ever shared my story. Give me just a minute. Okay. And it's a mother's perspective. I am here this morning to put a face and a voice to just one of the many lives and families impacted by the opioid crisis. Every day we are hearing alarming numbers and statistics related to this crisis. Every single number we hear, read, or see represents one addict. Every addict is somebody's somebody. My somebody is my son. The very word crisis means we are gathered in this forum to discuss something hard. It's hard to talk about, but it's even harder to listen. And I mean really listen. Crisis, it means a time of intense difficulty, trouble, or danger. The turning point when an important change takes place, indicating either recovery or death. You cannot change what you do not acknowledge, and you cannot acknowledge what you do not choose to seek to understand. I know because I've been. My jolt into the grips of the crisis happened on a Sunday morning. It was a joyful morning. I was listening to Oprah Winfrey's Super Soul Sunday show while I was cooking breakfast, pouring a lot of love into that breakfast. I love to cook. I remember the bacon was sizzling in the frying pan, the hot maple syrup was on the back burner, and the doorbell rang. This was early morning, so I thought, who in the world would be coming to visit on an early Sunday morning? In pajamas, too. I had to peer around to see who it was, and could make out through the beveled glass an image. Oh no, my heart dropped. It felt like it sunk all the way down to my feet. It was a police officer. I need to sit that there. Oh no, I went running to look out another window to see if my son's vehicle had made it safely home the night before. As I quickly recalled, I had gone to bed before knowing that he was home. Oh, it was there. I was relieved. My son was okay. Okay. Then I determined the police officer must have some kind of normal routine reason for ringing the doorbell. I opened the front door with a positive greeting. What can I help you with? Only to quickly be jolted back into a state of panic when he identified himself. And this is my story. I'm not here to tell my son's story, so I'm just going to use his first name. He asked in a very official tone, "Is Cody at this location?" The rest is a blur with snips of memories. I remember telling the officer he should be here. His vehicle is here. His room is upstairs. Then the next thing I remember was the officer descending the stairs, my son in handcuffs. Oh no, what's wrong? I was falling apart inside. My heart was beating so fast and so loud, I was trembling. I was looking into my son's eyes, searching for the answers. But his eyes were empty. It seemed to be gone. His face was blank, expressionless. His lips were so dry. I remember that. And I remember wanting to get him some water and give him some chapstick. And I remember the officer saying this, "No, ma'am. He will be okay when it gets out of his system." Didn't understand what that meant, but I definitely, everything was still reeling. The officer told me that my son was arrested for larceny and taken away. That jolted me. Larceny, isn't that stealing? Why? For what? Okay, I'll figure this out. Went running up to his room. I searched his room for the clues, for the answers. I was not prepared for what I found. I found so many needles. Needle casings that were hidden in coat pockets. Shoe boxes. Socks. I found tinfoil balls. I found weird shaped spoons, weird lighters. What is all of this? What does it mean? Why? What can I do? I don't know. I need help. I remember thinking that over and over again. Something is really, really bad wrong. My son is in trouble. Crisis. There's that word again. Difficulty, intense difficulty is what crisis is. I sat for hours in his room crying, actually praying, and all that came out was help. Help. That became my daily, hourly, weekly mantra. That one word for the next 12 days. I had a rock that I saw, grabbed it in my hand, and I knew so that I could function, that rock would remind me just to say help. And in one of my readings, the word help, a spiritual advisor that I think a lot of, characterizes that word to mean hello, eternal, loving presence. So I needed help, but that felt positive to say. Something is really, really bad wrong. My son is in trouble, crisis. He needs help. I love him. I want to help him. I'm his mother. I should know how to help. I sat for hours in this room. 4 weeks later, while I was involved in family education of addiction, I was to write how I felt and address it to the addict, my son, my somebody. This is a small excerpt. Felt like this could get it across the best. Just a small excerpt from that writing. Cody, today I am overwhelmed. My whole being is filled with feelings of being lost, afraid, and sad. I feel lost because I do not know how to find you. Where are you? I do not know how to find my way. I do not know how to be your mom and help you. How? It is so dark. I want to know what to do, how to do it, how to help you. It is so dark. I cannot even find a flashlight. Where is it? I don't know. I'm lost. We are in recovery. We've been lost. How do we find our way? I feel so sad. In the depths of my heart, I know that I have hurt you. I have placed a lot of shame, guilt, and judgment on you. Where is your moral fiber? Why don't you know right from wrong? I'm so sorry I did that over and over again. I never knew until today that addiction is not a moral choice or a moral issue. I am so sad that I projected that on you. The addiction got the high road, and I succumbed to what I felt like was normal parenting. Sizing you up, get it together, questioning your inner spirit, afraid of who you were or who you were becoming. I am sorry that I placed judgment on you. I am sad that I now know in doing that, I severed the hope lifeline from me to you. I feel inadequate. I am your mom. I don't know what to do to help you. Today, my dear son, this is what I'm doing. I surrender. I am powerless over you and your addiction. I have faith that God will show me how to love you and how to help you at the same time. Without finding help in the form of a treatment center for addiction for my son, and one that included family education and treatment, I would not have gotten to that place right there. And I'm a pretty smart person. But if I wouldn't have gotten there, I hate to think where I would be, much less, no, really just where I would be. It required knowledge and understanding of addiction. I would have continued to operate from a place a mother believes to be love and guidance, parenting. I did not know how to be the mother of an addict or how to love my somebody, that number. How to love from a heart and a head that embraces recovery, healing, and restoration. Well, you may say, how in the world did you find that kind of help? By the grace of God, because the day the opioid crisis rang my front doorbell, let's go back to that scene of the aftermath. I'm sitting on the floor of my son's bedroom, crying and lost. It was Sunday, February 9th, 2014. Then I was the 48-year-old mother of my 23-year-old son, and we needed help. Remember crisis, a time of intense difficulty, the turning point when an important change takes place, indicating either recovery or death. I cannot change what I do not acknowledge, and I cannot acknowledge what I do not seek to understand. I am a seeker, and I started my search. That Sunday, 2014, was the crisis point, the catalyst for change for me. I'm telling my story. I'm sure it was a catalyst for my son, but that was my crisis point. So what did I do? Well, later that morning I managed to stop the ugly crying, and I held it to an intermittent crying. I gathered up everything I have found, all the needles, tinfoil balls, strange spoons, lighters. I took pictures because I found these black smudges everywhere. And I dumped it all in a bag. Okay, this is probably where my risk management processes, they're what I do daily. I said, I need a subject matter expert to help me understand everything in this bag. Who would that be? A policeman? A vice narcotic officer? A hotline? Google? I don't know, but I kept saying help. Hello, eternal loving presence. Then it finally came to me. I would wake up on Monday morning and call our family physician first thing in the morning and schedule an appointment. Then I said, for what? Well, I would go in and tell him to code it however he wanted to, but I needed his time. Give me 2 slots if I need them. I needed to have a discussion, and I needed his medical expertise to tell me what that bag meant. And again, in my risk management world, if you don't get to root cause, if you don't get to root cause, you're not addressing or working towards anything meaningful or that helps you change. So that's where I was going to start. My appointment was Monday morning. Our doctor knew that Cody had graduated Asheboro High School in 2008 with a football scholarship to UNC Pembroke, an academic scholarship, and had gotten through his childhood emerging as a healthy, well-rounded, intellectually gifted. I think his IQ was in the top 3%. He was is a well-spoken young man with a lot going for him and a bright future ahead of him. So my doctor looked at me and said, I'm going to need some updates. Well, this is all I knew. December 2008, college Christmas break, his first major setback. He spent that break at his father's home, and during that visit, a physical altercation broke out. His father's wife called 911. Law enforcement responded. No one wanted to press charges, and no one was arrested. That night, I received a call from his father indicating to me that Cody was no longer welcome at his home. He did not know where Cody was, and he informed me that he had smashed Cody's phone during the physical fight, and I would not be able to reach him on that phone. I spent day after day going from door to door in close proximity to his father's home, which was in another county, Alamance County. Houses, food establishments, gas stations, looking for my son, showing his picture. I finally found a waitress who at least said she knew him, but had not seen him. I left her my name and number and asked her to please call me if she saw him or thought of anything that might help me find him. It was Christmas. I needed to find out if he was okay, bring him home, back to Randolph County. After about a week and a half, I finally got a call from the waitress who told me where I could find Cody and that he wanted me to come pick him up. He recounted his side of the devastating altercation with his father and just wanted to put it behind him and move on with his life. He went back to school and classes resumed. Fall of that year, during random drug testing related to the football program, he tested positive for marijuana. He was placed on suspension. This particular setback had a ripple effect. He stopped going to class and no signs of working to get reinstated. He was going in the other direction, down. He failed the semester. His football and academic scholarships were withdrawn. He came home. He told me he wanted to get it together and turn it around. I said, all right, roll up our sleeves. Let's get in there. Let's do it. Got to work. You know, we went over everything. He worked. He saved money. He found a place to rent. He got back out on his own, met a girl, got engaged, and then landed a job that paid for him to return to school in a work-study program, working at Technomart and attending GTCC. He was very smart and wanted to do that. Then came February 19th, 2013. My son's father lost his battle with addiction and shot himself in the head. The Alamance Sheriff's Office contacted the Randolph Sheriff's Office to notify the deceased next of kin, my son, his father's oldest child. He was to identify his father's body and handle the legal logistics of being the next of kin. Then came September 2013. While working, a steel plate fell on his hand and crushed 3 fingers. He was rushed to Randolph Hospital and then referred to a hand specialist. Didn't know this then, or I would have told the doctor this when this is while I'm at my visit. I would later learn that it was this injury that resulted in my son being prescribed opiates in both high dosages and in high quantities. The opiates, this is the aftermath of his father committing suicide, would come to be more than a treatment for physical pain. I would later learn it became my son's escape from the emotional pain. With his father's suicide and the long-standing difficult relationship that they had. Then came the beginning of December 2013. His fiancee broke off the engagement and ended the relationship. Then came the middle of December. Cody moved back home to try to get it back together again. He lost his job and then quickly found another one. He wrecked that company's truck and lost that job. This is happening very fast. Then came the end of December 13. I found out that Cody had pawned everything that he owned except a few personal items and several bags of clothes. Cody's explanation was that he was trying to remain independent and not have to come back home. And he called it liquidating his assets to pay his bills. Then, February 2014, Sunday morning, that doorbell rang. So as you can see, the point he was prescribed the opiates, September, within 6 months, he had lost absolutely everything. And at the same time, really lost himself. But the good doctor listened to all these updates and he looked at the contents of the bag I'd brought in. He suspected Cody was struggling with addiction. He educated me a little bit on what addiction was. And his big thing was, he said, the genetic propensity that most likely existed due to his father's addiction and the same gender transference, because I wrote everything down everywhere I went. Same gender transference of that disease or predisposition of the propensity towards that disease is what he believed the state Cody was in. However, he suspected the items in the bag represented either a heroin addiction or some type of opiate addiction involving crushing pills, mixing them with liquid, and injecting them directly into his veins. He believed that I needed greater guidance, especially with Cody being in jail with this current crisis, and he made an emergency referral to a counselor who he instructed to facilitate a conference call to a psychiatrist. I said, whoa, what? But I just stopped. I was like, I didn't need to ask questions regarding that. I just needed to keep writing. I was further educated on the crisis that my son was in when I met the counselor and had the telephone conference. I learned he was most likely a full-blown heroin addict. These are the primary things I wrote down. He went to jail on Sunday. Monday, I'm learning all this as the day went through. And putting this together, y'all, helped me so much in going back through all my notes, my journals, and putting this together because, like I said, this is the first time I've told this story. This psychiatrist said it's imperative that he receive inpatient drug treatment. Due to being in jail, he will start detoxing. The jail has medical services, so Mom, do not worry. I was like, yeah, right, hell my rock. If he makes bail and gets out of jail, he will shoot up again. That's not a maybe, that is, he will. It is the most dangerous time because the addict returns to the same drugs at the same quantity and ends up unintentionally overdosing. He must want help, though, the psychiatrist said. He must want recovery. He has to choose it. A lot of hard work is ahead of him. Then he said the entire family must become educated about addiction and recovery and get into some form of recovery treatment. Each family member that chooses recovery has a lot of hard work ahead of them. Perfect. That was my list. I had my to-do list. My only choice is I will do whatever it takes. I left my son in jail. I called and emailed everyone I knew, pleading and begging them not to bail Cody out of jail. I think if he came up with $1,000, and if you were the person receiving the call, because I got calls all day Sunday, Mama, I just started that job. you know, and he loves to cook too. He said, and it's in the kitchen, and we're going to be coming up with recipes. And I mean, it was all I could do to say I love you, but I'm going to do what helps you. But Mama, and then mad, and I'm just everything I know that these addicts do, it's to get to that next fix. They'll tell you whatever they think you want to hear. So I left him there, made all these phone calls, and you know what? I did not frantically start searching for an attorney to get my son out of owning the consequences of his actions. That wasn't on my to-do list, but that just did not make common sense. It was not on my to-do list. I frantically started looking for bullet point number 1, though, and that was, I need to find an inpatient treatment center. Call after call, no beds. If no insurance or pay source, the cost was anywhere from $5,000 to $85,000. Still no beds though, what good was that? I wrote Dr. Phil, I called facilities that were on his website, I Googled, I called anything in North Carolina, dual diagnosis, that's what I wanted, that would be the best of the best. I called and I called and I called. I took calls from my son from jail. I visited my son in jail. I printed literature about addiction and rehab because if he didn't choose it, what was I going to do then? And I left. I went to each one of these days, I went to work at Randolph County Office Building. And the jail was just down the road, knowing my son was in jail. That first court appearance, yeah, he had a public defender. That was the least of my worries. My son needs to live. No bed though. Oh no, oh no. Finally, a bed came open in Greensboro. $15,000 for 28 days. I'll take it. Not knowing where I would get the money, not knowing how I'd come up with it, but I knew I would. Told the public defender he has to go from jail to that facility because if he doesn't, he'll shoot up and he'll die. Well, but he needs to get out today. This is his first appearance. He has nothing on his record. This will hurt him down the road. I don't care. I do not care about any of that. I need for him to live. And just 2 days prior to that, he'd been in jail 12 days, and at that visit, he turned his arms around to me. Couldn't hold him or feed him or touch him. I was a glass. He said, I want this, and he put the thing up to the glass, and it was the treatment. I said, I'll do whatever it takes. You got it. So here we are back at court, though. The judge needed to get him out or this would hurt him down the road. I didn't care. But the bed wasn't open. But they need to let him out today. Well, I'll pay how much ever he needs to stay in there. So the judge creatively came up with $1 and released this adult man, he wasn't even, a child or a juvenile, to his mother on the day that that bed was available. I picked him up, paid the $1, and took him to that bed. And that was just the beginning. And here's one last thing I want to leave you with. Crisis is hard. But this was day 1, and it was a long letter, and Cody did write letters, but I'm going to just read just 2 excerpts from this, because I think this gives the balance. This isn't telling his story, but Mama, and it was 2:20, whatever he was doing up here with his time. He said, it's his first day at jail, blah, blah, blah. I mean, not at jail, at rehab. I'm meeting some really awesome people who have the same disease as me, addiction. We are all prisoners to our own disease. We are our own worst enemies. There's a quote from my Narcotics Anonymous text that I want to share with you. The only way to keep from returning to active addiction is not to take that first drug. If you are like us, you know that 1 is too many and 1,000 is never enough. We put great emphasis on this as For we know that when we use drugs in any form or substitute, one for another, we release our addiction all over again. I wanted to share this with you, Mama, in hopes that you can start to understand that I'm a prisoner in my own mind. It is sometimes hard for people who aren't addicts to understand how our brains work. Once we have taken that first drug, our disease completely takes over, and we become prisoners to our addiction. Another topic, Mama, I really would like to address with you is my appreciation and understanding of your tough love you showed me by leaving me in jail. I strongly believe that if I had not been left in jail, I would not have experienced what I believe is a spiritual awakening. I came to Fellowship Hall a completely awake and new spirit. I just want you to know that. I can only imagine how hard it must have been for you to leave me in jail. But I'm 100% confident it was the right decision. This was so funny. I commend you for your courage. It takes courage to change. But I cannot change what I do not acknowledge, and I cannot acknowledge something I choose not to understand. Thank you.
Richard Pavlock is a board-certified internal medicine physician. He's a fellowship-trained developmental disabilities physician and a board-eligible addiction medicine physician. He has more than 20 years of clinical practice in the treatment of people with developmental disabilities in internal medicine. For the past 9 years, his practice is focused on physical and mental behavioral health for people living with intellectual developmental disabilities.
Thank you. I appreciate the invitation here. You know, I'm a board-certified medical director and also a board-certified internist. As a medical director, my charge is really to look at the systems of care. And, you know, I've done that in developmental disabilities for probably the last 9 to 10 years. And we've been able to bring down costs and really dramatically increase quality. My goal here is to try to bring that to the opiate epidemic. Over the last year, we've been working with our partners over at Sandhills, where we have developed some very innovative treatment programs to ensure immediate access to people with opiate addiction. I got an increased understanding that this is more needs to be addressed at a community level. People, the whole community coming together to coordinate what we need to do, and I think that's how we're going to be most cost-effective and most and ensure the best quality. That's why I'm so excited to be here. I think this is the first step. It's something that we could really do to move things forward to curb this opiate epidemic. Now, my goal here is to kind of just show you a little bit about what we're dealing with, and then to explain exactly the pathophysiology of addiction. It's no longer a debate. Nobody can have an opinion on what addiction is. It's been proven medically, and I want to show you the evidence. And then I want to show you the little interventions and help you kind of understand where we're coming from when we talk about treatment. All right? I think this works. All right. Susan kind of told us where we are. Now, this 19% here has been the biggest increment ever, and that was last year. And this is deaths from opiates, okay? Now, of all people under 50, the most likely cause of death is going to be drug overdose, okay? So Susan went through that. I'm not going to go a lot on the epidemiology. This is what I am going to do, because this is really the crux of the problem. I really want you to pay attention to this. This, in 2000, and I was at medical director, was chief of medicine over at Davis Community Hospital. And all of a sudden, we got something in from the JCAH telling us that pain is the 5th vital sign. And if we don't have it on there, by the time they do their review, we're not going to get licensed. All right? And I was the guy that actually had to implement that stuff. And the reason they did that is doctors were reluctant to go with these opiates. But it actually became the standard. And I don't know if you know anything about JCAH, but I liken it to the AAA rating that Standard & Poor's gave to the mortgage-backed securities. Because once that was on there, you know, that was it. That was the standard. And I really had to enforce it, you know. So over the next decade, and that's the 2010 here, my aim stinks. But, wait a minute, oh, it's the wrong one. 2010 here. Now, we were told by OxyContin and all these manufacturers that, oh, don't worry about addiction. That only happens in a small amount of people. If you use long-acting ones like ours, it's not an issue, all right? And, you know, I was in a practice then. My partners and I decided that we were going to send all Schedule II to pain management because it was really a difficult situation. But that's what wound up happening, is the OxyContins, MS-Contins, and all that really got prescribed. And that was a big problem in 2002, and everybody's saying, well, what should we do about it? Well, they went to the makers of OxyContin, gave them a $400 million fine, convicted them of misdemeanors for false representation, and now we got a $5 billion problem. I mean, I don't know how much it is, but you guys probably know better than me. But what the MS-Contin did was they changed their preparation from being a white powder that was easily storable and injectable to like a gummy substance. So all of a sudden, the people that were using it couldn't shoot it, couldn't snort it anymore. At the same time, very, very high quality heroin came in from Colombia and from Afghanistan. And that's 2010, right? Now, and I've spoken to these people at length. I mean, I hear that story 20 times a day, okay? They all went from using pain medicines to, you know, to using heroin, okay? Because it was cheaper and it was much better, you know? And once we did that, look at what happened to the death rates in heroin. They went up 3.5 times. And that's really what we're living in now. This is our problem. And this problem is a lot different than the 1960s. Do not get the heroin addiction problem now confused with the people from the 1960s. In the 1960s, it was black, urban teenagers, okay? Now it's white, rural, and people who were actually in pain. I actually went the other day and I said, I took my next 20 Suboxone patients and I said, well, why did you start? You know, I really wanted to get into it. And 15 of them had surgeries. 12 of them were orthopedic surgeries. Okay? And 3 of them were C-sections. And that's actually how they got started. Now, I'm going to show you a little bit about addiction later, and you'll understand anybody could be in that predicament. All right? And it's a genetic predisposition. All right? So just understand, that's our problem. That's what people are dying from, that last slope going up. And they're much different population than the 1960s. You're not going to get fat, your dad's heroin addiction. Now, I'm going to go into what actually is addiction, okay? This slide shows euphoria. That's what all addicts are looking for. And I want to emphasize that it's been found out over the last 20 years, and this has been crucial, that the nervous system can change in response to the environment. It's called neuroplasticity. We used to think that it never changed, but I'm going to show you later, we've been able to confirm that it actually does change, okay? And that 40 to 60% of why somebody will be an addict is genetically determined. Now, that doesn't mean that if they never get exposed to environmentally, they're going to be an addict. But it does mean if they're exposed to heroin one time, 25% of people are going to become addicts. So it's a predisposition. So even a doctor giving, you know, a tooth extraction, that there's a 25% chance that that person's going to be addicted. And it goes higher for cigarettes, which is 32%, and for cocaine, it was like 17%. But understand, people have a genetic predisposition, all right? Now, everything that makes you happy in your life, okay, is mediated by either serotonin and dopamine. Whether it's a relationship with your family, whether it's eating a nice meal, whether it's doing methamphetamine, okay? All of those things this is what makes you happy, all right? Now, these are the two areas in your brain. These are very primitive part of the brain, okay? It's called the nucleus accumbens and the VTA. Now, this is the limbic system. This is what lizards have. So evolutionary, this is the first part you got, right? And the only thing it cares about is what can I get now? I need my reward now, boom, boom, boom. I don't care about anything else. Nothing else in the world matters, all right? Then as you get older and you become human, your executive function starts to kick in. And it really doesn't develop till you're about 24, 25. That's why addiction before that age is so dangerous, okay? But this is the, you know, like, I don't know, you remember A Christmas Story, you're gonna shoot your eye out, right? The parent saying, this is no, you know, you don't wanna do this. You wanna think about this, right? Okay? So those are the two systems we're talking about. It's the limbic system, all right, which I just want, and you got the cortex system, which this is the executive function. You got to think of what you do, what's going to happen down in the future, this and that and the other. Essentially, I'm going to show you how addiction is a battle between those. Okay? If you look at anything that you have in life that makes you happy, here you're walking around with a 100% baseline. This here will do it for you? Okay. All right. 100% is the baseline. Now that's if you're walking around just normal. Okay. Now if you have sex, it'll go up double, and that makes you happy, right? If you do methamphetamine, which is the highest inducer of dopamine, it'll be 1250. Okay. So you ever wonder why people with methamphetamine don't even care about eating and will just lay in bed? All that stuff doesn't mean anything. They need that 1250 to keep going. All right? Now, I'll show you why. This picture here in the middle is crucial. If your brain sees all that amount of dopamine coming into the synaptic clefts, it's going to say, oh, I can't handle this, okay? I'm going to decrease the number of receptors for dopamine. So even if I have a 1250, I don't really have receptors to do it. So I'm going to need even more dopamine, okay? And that's the idea of downregulation. And that does happen. It's called neuroplasticity. Now, this here is what actually proved that addiction is an entity. It's not like fibromyalgia. It's not like ADHD. It's imaged, all right? And in medicine, we always argue about what's causing what until we can image it. So here it is, imaged. It was imaged 3 years ago, okay? This is called a functional MRI that shows brain activity, okay? On the left are the substances that these people are addicted to. On the right, in this middle column, the middle column is control, and this is their response to normal, everyday pleasure events, something like a good steak, okay? You can see that a person who is addicted to any of these substances has a much less response to everyday good things, all right? And that's documented on a functional MRI, and that shows the activity, okay? Now, pushing noise away, but this battle between the cortex, you know, the executive function, and the lizard function increasing and the cortex coming down, is really what we use clinically to establish the diagnosis of addiction, okay? These 5 characteristics, and I couldn't see them, but I know they're cravings, you need more and more, and you develop a withdrawal symptom when you don't have it. Now that's all that lizard part of the brain, all right? And that's dominating as you increase the dopamine. And that neuroplasticity makes a loop, okay? Now the executive function part of the brain is decreasing, okay? So what it does is less. So you don't care where you do it. You don't care who you're hurting when you do it. You don't care about the job you had. You don't care that things you used to like to do. And we actually measure those characteristics. And these are the 11 elements of addiction. What I want you to pay attention to is that the physical withdrawal is only one characteristic, right? So you say you have a child that's born to an opiate addicted mother, right? They're going to come out and they're going to be physically dependent. Now that doesn't make them an addict because they don't have any of these other characteristics. So you call it physical dependence, okay? Now, if it's greater than 3 of these, less than 3, it's mild. If it's less than 5, it's moderate, and greater than 6 is severe. And that's actually how we make the diagnosis clinically, okay? And it's just a good thing to understand because you know what the fragilities of an addiction person will be. Now this is the good news, okay? It was the same functional MRIs that showed that this is a reversible disease, okay? And that it takes time. This up here is the function of the brain, okay? And those are normal controls. And what they're doing is they're giving them a stimulus, you know, like a state or a relationship or family bonding or whatever makes people happy, okay? And this is them 10 days after abstinence, okay? And you see that the activity is much less, right? But then you look at 100 days out, it's almost 50%. I can tell you they carried it out, and when you got to about a year, it was almost equal. And that correlates, actually, when we get to somebody abstinent for a year, their executive function takes over. They start thinking about, well, what am I going to do in my life? I'm going to go to school. I didn't do that. Has a lot of implications as far as rehabilitation, okay? It's very dependent on time. It's really important that everybody understands that. Like, getting someone who's addicted in that 10 days, talking to him about his school, his job, and all that, that ain't good. They ain't even going to be able to think about that for 3 months. They just got to stay off of the drugs for 3 months. You know, then they can start thinking about it. And that was the problem we had in the past. We'd say, okay, let's get them detoxed for 28 days and put them out. All right? That worked for 0% of the people. It was unbelievable how bad that worked. When I was a resident in Staten Island, I used to do a detox unit, and we called it a tune-up. We just really were tuning them up so they can go out for another month and come on back. And now we all realize that that's the absolute wrong way to approach it. All right? What we have to do is get them out to that year where they can start making those executive function decisions and where that dopamine level goes down to where they can start being satisfied by normal events of their life. Okay? This is just kind of reinforced the idea that addiction is a chronic disease. Okay? It's extremely similar in both adherence and relapse to the other chronic diseases we deal with, like diabetes, hypertension, and asthma. It almost has the exact same rates, so it's not a lost cause, you know, and I think a lot of people think of addiction as a lost cause. It's not. It has the same rates as somebody if you were going to treat them for diabetes, about whether they're going to get better. Okay? And that's been proven. And that's the idea of that. Now, this is what you need to understand how opiates relate to that addiction model I showed you. Okay? Now, in this addiction model, oh boy, hang on. All right, here we go. The mu receptor is what the opiates go to. Okay? Then it acts on that nucleus accumbens to release dopamine. Okay? So we're talking about activity on the mu receptor on this axis here. See here? That's the activity. Now I want to show you what happens. If you activate that new receptor too much, you get euphoria and respiratory depression, and that's what leads to death, okay? You also get relief of the physical withdrawal signs and the pain, you can get relief from pain, okay? So those are the 4 things that opiates will give you. A full agonist, like methadone, heroin, oxycodone, hydrocodone, oxycodone, and fentanyl, all right, they could stimulate that new receptor to 100%. So it's possible to get euphoria and respiratory depression. On the other hand, naloxone and Vivitrol, naloxone and naltrexone will prevent any drug from getting on there. And that's why we use it to reverse overdoses and why we use it to prevent people from being able to take opiates. The one I really want you to pay attention to, and I guess I'm a very big advocate, is Suboxone, okay? This characteristic is the crucial thing. This is called the ceiling effect, okay? No matter how much Suboxone you give someone, okay, they can't get up to, they can't get up to here, okay? It stops, it flattens out. So I can give them thousands of milligrams of Suboxone and they'll never get up there. Not only that, but Suboxone will grab onto that new receptor much better than heroin, oxycodone, or any of these. So that drugs can't get onto the receptor. So if you had Suboxone in your system and you took a lot of heroin, it's just a waste of money. It doesn't do anything to the receptors because the oxycodone is blocking. I mean, the buprenorphine is blocking. That's why SAMHSA is pushing Suboxone so hard. And we're going to have a big workforce coming out in the medical end of treatment for people that are waivered. And I was waivered 7 years ago for Suboxone. And it's actually been very effective. There's never been a death on Suboxone, okay? And there's never been a death unless they've been on either benzodiazepine or alcohol together, okay? Really, when you look at the opiate prescription drugs, it's actually methadone that is actually the highest prescription drug that causes death. Now, I just want to clarify because nobody really ever understands it. Suboxone has buprenorphine in it, and it has naloxone. Now, the reason they put those two together, and over in France, when they first just started buprenorphine, people were sniffing it and shooting it, and they could get high, okay? So they put naloxone on it, which I showed you is an antagonist, okay? Which means that it would stop everything. But they found out that when they give it to you under the tongue, the naloxone stays not absorbed, and the buprenorphine gets absorbed, okay? So it's really the buprenorphine that works. Subutex is just buprenorphine alone, so you don't have that protection against diversion, which is kind of one of the things we worry about. But it's a lot cheaper, and it's very useful in pregnancy. And then there's other medicines with the same preparation. But getting back to the Vivitrol, you know, the #1 rehabilitation program known to man is the pilots. They have like a 97% success rate. And what they do is they make the pilots take this Vivitrol once every 28 days. Okay? Very effective. Also, the physician dependency program uses this, and we're about 85%. So I just kind of wanted to give you a little feel of what's out there. The tools are tremendous. I think we got to start thinking about how aggressive we want to be with them. Like, I would argue that somebody who's in the first 3 months of opiate dependence is not able to make their own decisions. And I think that's the big problem. You know, and the whole problem we have is convincing them. Like, I cannot convince one person to do Vivitrol. It's impossible. But I would know it would work 100% of the time. Now, if it was court ordered, that might work. I'm just saying, but that's the kind of thing we have to consider here. You know, all right. The only other thing I wanted you to do is, you know, she was saying before, how do you get the information? You know, if you guys want to read a great book, this Dreamland is all about how the heroin epidemic got started. Very entertaining and very on point, really on point. The story I told you about OxyContin and all that is really well laid out. You can go on the web, and the addicts that I do, I actually go on the web and look and see what they do. These are some of the great sites that you can see how they're using it, why they're using it, the paraphernalia they're using it, things that would have been very good to her. Last one is, you know, I don't know if anybody has Netflix, but there's Drugs Inc., okay? I was watching this, and I'm from Staten Island. There was a guy that was there who was an opiate pusher, you know, and this was his marketing plan. I'm going to put one bag of fentanyl in every lot of heroin I put out. This way somebody overdoses, and everybody thinks I have the best heroin. Essentially, the guy was admitting to murder on TV. I couldn't believe it. But he was very true to point. So if you want to really just see how these people think and what they're doing, it's on Netflix, and it's really, I think, pretty interesting. Anyway, I'm willing to entertain any questions. Thanks.
Dr. Joseph Stapara is the medical director for Randolph County Emergency Medical Services. In 2016, he was recognized as the North Carolina Doctor of the Year.
Hey everybody, it's an honor to be here. Today I'm going to talk to you about how opioid abuse affects emergency management, specifically how EMS interacts with opioids and the abuse of those opioids. So briefly, I'm going to give you just a little bit about the state level, but we've seen some of that, so I'm going to be super brief. The action plan and how it affects emergency management, and then dial in on what it's like here for patients that have emergencies and how we respond to that, and the next steps that we're going to take. This is a graph that I think you may have kind of seen in previous presenters' talks, but it's certainly showing that the synthetic narcotics are becoming more and more the cause of death within our state. So that's state level information all the way up to 2016. The state level plan, a 5-year plan that has sent to us, has certain things that we in emergency management need to address. And the marker for us in emergency management really is the number of Narcan uses. And as you can see there in 2016, that number in our state was over 13,000. Pretty impressive number. The two things that they want us to focus on is community paramedicine. That's something that we're going to talk a little bit more about later. And then also, which I think makes a lot of good sense, what are we going to do after we reverse someone? We can't just put the Band-Aid on, here's your Narcan, and then be done with it. We really need to look and see what our next steps are. And I think that's a responsible thing for us to look at. Here is a state level map, and obviously you know Randolph is right in the middle from 2012, and you can see that we're light green there. In 2016, the same map we've changed to yellow, which is not a good thing, okay? Our per capita Narcan administrations have changed levels, all right? Which means that we are moving in the wrong direction. Our trend is not positive. And this is a similar graph between this slide, 2016 per capita, 2016 raw counts, okay? And again, here we are in that yellow category. This is just a trend line showing that as we progress to 2021, we're going to continue to get worse unless we have some pretty aggressive approaches. So to dial down into this Narcan naloxone drug that people are starting to hear more and more about, it's certainly a great opportunity for us to have and to understand. the two pictures on the right in the middle of the slide show formulations that patients or patients' family can give one another. The picture on the top and the bottom are what we use in EMS and first response. And the top picture, I'm sorry it's a little bit small, is the intranasal administration, and on the bottom is what we give either IV, intravenously, or intramuscularly as a shot. Fortunately, they've done some studies that show that if a patient returns to normal after this medicine is given, this reversal agent is given, these patients don't need another shot as long as they return back to normal. That being said, about 10% of the time, patients don't achieve that normal and need to have another dose of this reversal agent. The tough thing is that as a provider and a healthcare provider, a paramedic, they feel a responsibility once they've reversed an overdose to care for that patient. And oftentimes, that person who's overdosed gets reversed. They're not exactly happy with you, right? So there's a lot of conflict there. And there's some legal question and some malpractice questions. Is there abandonment there? So this is a tough thing for our healthcare providers in the pre-hospital environment to wrestle with. But the good news is that most of the time these patients don't need another dose. They are not going to go to that near-death state that required them to receive the reversal agent. An interesting picture up there on the right side is different volumes of drug, comparing heroin to fentanyl to carfentanyl. And you'd really have to live under a rock to not hear all the hype around carfentanyl, the gray death, all of the high numbers of patients that are dying from these high-dose, potent, synthetic opioid analogs. The other part of this that's really taxing on my pre-hospital providers is there's fear that they're going to be exposed to these ultra-high potent drugs. Fortunately, our medical toxicologist societies have come out with a reassuring statement, and I believe this to be very true. And simply put, it says if we use our normal PPE, personal protective equipment, our chances of unintentionally getting a dose of narcotic while responding to somebody that has this carfentanyl is extraordinarily unlikely. That being said, it's always good to have appropriate PPE in place. So where are we and what are our next steps? As we saw on a previous slide from our health director, we don't have any law enforcement agencies currently that are giving Narcan or naloxone, but that's going to change. There has been a tremendous amount of interest lately, and that's something I support. I'm perfectly happy to support our law enforcement agencies to train, to report, and then go through a quality improvement process to assure that that they have all the support they need to be successful. The next thing that I really want you all to kind of remember from today is the term community paramedicine. And it's really exactly what it describes. It is a paramedic who is a healthcare professional, trained and comfortable outside of the hospital to go into the community and to help people within the community with these chronic diseases like we learned right before, to not fall flat again, to not be empty, to not have a coordinated post-reversal response from our community. So I think we've been charged with this, that this is part of the things that we in Randolph County need to address, need to focus on, need to move forward with, and we are prepared within Randolph County Emergency Services to have this plan put in motion as soon as we can get the funding and the support to do that. So in summary, it's a problem. I like to speak truth whenever I can. Opioids are at the crisis level here in this county. We need to do something very aggressive. We need to speak the truth. We need to decrease the hype, but come together as a community to really address these things. And it really is going to be a partnership for us to figure out the ways that we're going to do it here in Randolph County. Thank you very much for your time. Have a great rest of the day.
Teresa Gaskin is been in nursing since she was 16 years old. Wow. And she's currently the Assistant Director of the Emergency Services at Randolph Health, formerly Randolph Hospital.
Thank you for having me today. My job today is to tell you how opioids affect the emergency department hospital. What I have here is very truthful, it's very raw, not all pretty because it's not a pretty disease, and I just wanted to go forward. The first step I took was to ask our staff, our frontline, boots on the ground, how's this affecting our emergency department? So what I got mostly was, we have these patients who come into our department, they're demanding narcotics for their non-narcotics needs, and then they become physically abusive when they do not get. Physically and verbally abusive when they do not get their narcotics. We also have had an increased call volume from local pharmacies who are asking if they should fill new narcotic prescriptions that ED has prescribed because the patient had just had 120 filled last week. That was from our ED secretary because she's the one who gets the calls. Dealing with the repetitive patients who are given Narcan, naloxone, are physically abusive once they become stable, alert, and awake. Then they want to leave against medical advice. Dr. Stapira talked about that a bit, and the legalities that go along with that. I did have a nurse who had come back after 10 years, and she said, you know, 10 years ago the overdoses were minimal, and now we have one almost every day. And the last one was an ED provider. He said, in the past it was always me personally who would have to make the decision on narcotic pain control or non-narcotic pain control. I actually like the fact that there are laws which are going to be enacted about the number of pills I can prescribe. Our opioid, our emergency medical services, and through private vehicle. Emergency medical services, we are giving radio notice of patient's arrival. We can be prepared, and EMS will give us the information of what they can give them. EMS doesn't want to give them, they want to give them enough naloxone to keep them in the car, in the ambulance. Once you give them a little too much, they get physical in the car, in the ambulance, and then it's hard to control them. So they want to keep them, the respiration's good until they get to us. And then in the private vehicle, these patients are brought to us. We have no pre-notification. Security or registration makes us aware that they're there. We go out to the car with our PPE, and we actually can give the naloxone nasally. These patients do not have IV access. You can't wait to get IV access. They've used all their veins. There's nothing left but nasally for this. You can also give it IM. But we give it in the car, and then there's getting them out of the car. And then they want to leave. Our opioid patients, I want you to know how many resources they use in our emergency department. The ED provider, security. Therapeutic Alternatives is our DayMark. We work with them. A patient safety sitter. If this is an intentional overdose, most of these are not, most of them are unintentional, then we have to have a patient sitter with them. We have to have a tech, registered nurses. We also have telemedicine, telepsychiatry that can help these patients. Registration, EMS, laboratory, I can't see the other one, but anyway, you can see all the resources for this one patient who is overdosed. So this means increased length of stay for our other patient. It means other patients maybe aren't getting what they need right at that time, but these are the patients we need to take care of until we can get them back to where they need to be. This is actually, I was walking through the department and I was like, this was just this week, and I said, oh my gosh. So here we are. This patient received 3 doses of Narcan, was combative after administration, requiring 2 security officers, 2 sheriff deputies, 2 RNs, 1 nurse's assistant, and EMS. So that's an actual room in our department where a patient was brought this week. This data is data we pulled from our coding. So we had 229 overdoses from the last year, July 2016 to 2017. Of them, over 180 were high acuity, meaning it took all these resources. About 40-ish, 48 or so, 45 were our lower acuity, didn't take that many resources, but as you can see, a majority of them did take that many resources to take care of these folks. And our naloxone usage, you've heard a lot about naloxone. We had 311 doses given in the emergency department that we counted. So that means we have a vending machine, sort of. You can get Diet Pepsi or anything, no, I'm just kidding. You can just get any type of medication you need. So that's the medication you actually pulled from our MedSelect or vending machine. We also have crash carts that we don't actually count, that we are pulling naloxone from. So there were 311 doses plus given in our emergency department in Randolph County. We also had, I talked to Charles Reeder. This is very raw. Charles, as you know, there was an interim coroner in our county in March, but these are the death rates he gave me that came to the hospital due to opioid overdose. So 24 in the last year. Financial impact on hospital. I pulled our payer mix for these guys, for these patients. So 19% had private insurance, 40% Medicare, Medicaid, 38% were self-pay, and 3% charity care. And this was based on those 229 patients seen in the last year. I talked to our provider, our providers, our medical director. I said, tell me your concerns, tell me the effects. And as Dr. Stapira talked about, their concern for litigation. Do I give them too much? Do I give them too little? Am I going to be sued in 5 years because I didn't treat their pain? Being held accountable, they're now being held accountable for the prescriptions they have written. And now they're only giving narcotics prescriptions for burns, kidney stones, and some fractures. You'll notice you will get a lot of Tylenol, you will get a lot of Motrin, but you're not going to get the narcotic prescriptions you got in the past. And they will start prescribing lower dosage of narcotics, such as Tramadol. The Motrin and Tylenol, of course, aren't narcotics, but you would get a lower dose of Tramadol instead of the Percocets, the Vicodin, the Oxycontin. And also the decreased amount of total pills written, usually 30 pills, now 14 to 20. Catherine talked about that a little bit, how her son got probably 30 pills. And you don't need 30 pills. You might need 14, you might need none. But the STOP Act that legislative have passed, and we'll talk about that a little bit, has a lot of effect on how many pills you will get. And our chronic back pain patients are very problematic. How do we treat them? They've gotten opiates for years, so how now do we treat these patients? So we've got a lot to learn. The hospital's response, we now have a North Carolina database that's easily accessible through our medical records, through our electronic medical records, where the physicians can go in and see how many narcotics. Obviously, that physician that wrote the tablets for 30 when the patient had just gotten 120 didn't access this database. So it may be required, and I think in January it will be required, you know, I can speak to Dr. Pavlov, that you have to access the database before you prescribe any narcotics. So this tells you exactly how many pills anybody has received in North Carolina as far as narcotics. This is just another way to find the database where it makes it easy. You know, it takes a lot of time to go in on the internet and find these things, so the physicians want rapid access because we have to see a lot of patients a day. We also have applied for a Lock Your Medications campaign. What can we do? And you might see this a little bit later. She gets her hair from her mom, her eyes from her dad, and her drugs from her grandma's purse. So be aware, don't share Lock Your Meds. Giving lock boxes to these patients who we know, just getting education out that you can throw away your prescriptions. You don't have to keep all these prescriptions. Just get rid of them. And all of us have them in our drawer. I mean, you know, that one Percocet I might need when I fall. Provider and nursing education. The STOP Act is the Strengthen Opioid Misuse Prevention Act, which will come effect in January, that gives a lot of restrictions on what these physicians can write. And treating, preparing patients for non-narcotic usage. How are we going to take care of these patients now that we're pulling all their narcotics from them? How will we do that? Dr. Pavlov talked about the JCAH, which is Joint Commission, which is our accrediting body for hospitals. We need to review those standards on pain management. Now they're saying, why are you blaming me? Everybody wants to blame somebody, and now you're blaming us. And now they're coming back and saying, we didn't say pain was the fifth vital sign. Why are you saying we said that? But there's lots of standards you have to meet for that. Resources available for patients and addiction, and of course the Lock Your Meds campaign. What kind of improvements can we make at Randolph Hospital? We just went through some things thinking about what can we do to help this. Providing naloxone prescriptions when we're prescribing opiates. I know we do have one physician doing that right now. Have patient access to therapeutic alternatives who have unintentional overdoses during their emergency department visit. If we can keep them there long enough, we can get some help for them. The problem is trying to keep them there. Provide naloxone kits on discharge to patients who meet high-risk categories. Just give them the naloxone. Provide multiple routes of administration of naloxone for easy access for RNs. And provide medication drop box for unused medication, or provide education of location of drop boxes throughout the city. Drop boxes are where you can take your medication, your old medication, anybody, throw it in like a mailbox, and it's very secure, and somebody comes around and gets rid of it. Implement an opioid prevention program in the emergency department recommended by the Emergency Nurses Association. So I just wanted to show you this. This is education I did in 2015 for our nursing staff. Louis had actually called me and said, Teresa, we're going to do a drill on carfentanil. And I'm like, what in the world is carfentanil? This is just 2 years ago. Well, we have elephants here. We have the zoo here. That's what they tranquilize the elephants with. And I'm like, oh, Charlotte doesn't have elephants. Okay, good. We're gonna do this drill. Well, two years later now, this is what they give the elephants to tranquilize them. 2 years later, now, what are we going to do for the people who come in? So it's, as you can see, it's 10,000 times more potent than morphine and 100 times more potent than fentanyl. That's how dangerous this carfentanil is. So that's where I wanted to leave you. Any questions?
Claudia Marini is a Randolph County resident. On December the 29th, 2016, Claudia's daughter Madison passed away from an overdose. Since that day, she's been an advocate all over the Piedmont, North Carolina. She's currently a board member for Phoenix Rising of Winston-Salem, which is a nonprofit that helps fund drug court and rehabilitation.
This way down. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. I do speak quite a bit. This is probably the largest group face-to-face I've done, so as Catherine said, it's a little nerve-wracking, and especially with the topic, but thank you for this opportunity. I recently spoke to a group, and I apologized from the beginning because I knew that because I've been on the media and in the papers that they were probably going to hear a lot of the same things. And I kind of felt bad about that. And then it kind of hit me on this horrific new journey of mine that resonated so deeply. Of course they were going to hear the same thing. It's a true life story, and I don't have the luxury to rewrite it. So I'm sure some of you today are going to hear those same things. As he mentioned, Maddie passed away December 29, 2016, 7.5 months ago, 230 days to be exact. Sadly, most people count the days to their child's wedding, graduation, those kinds of lovely, great events. I no longer have that. So this is what I count, unfortunately. If you've heard one story about an addict, you've heard basically everybody's story about an addict. I thank Catherine because she's probably saved me about 20 minutes to tell you my journey through addiction with her son, because it's pretty much the same thing. A few minor details here and there, but pretty much it's the same horrible journey. I could stand up here and talk about my Maddie for hours and days. I can tell you that when she entered a room, whether you knew her or not, you never forgot her. She just had that kind of presence. She was breathtakingly beautiful. She had the most mesmerizing eyes, a contagious smile, and a laugh and personality that was bigger than life itself. She was vibrant, incredibly loyal to every friend she had, and she helped everyone, whether they walked on 2 feet or 4. We do rescue for animals, so she had that love. People always ask me and want to know what happened. Why did Maddie turn to using drugs? This well-loved, full of opportunities, academically gifted, brilliant, avid reader, soccer player, singer, model, I can go on and on. Maddie didn't fit the typical stereotype for somebody who's an addict or what they would act like or even look like. I speak to different groups of all ages, and I'm always surprised and heartbroken when I ask them to describe what an addict looks like. These are the adjectives I hear: dirty, mean, homeless, a thief. The harsh reality is drugs, and especially heroin, do not discriminate, and addiction has no specific type. No one is immune. There are many debates about whether addiction is a choice or a disease, and I won't go into great detail about that because, as you just heard, it is a disease. Yes, they all have the free will to make that initial choice to use. Some are curious and try it just because. Some succumb to peer pressure, but most become victims due to some mental illness that affects them so much that they feel the need to escape the pain and sadness of everyday life. Maddie had both. She struggled with self-esteem issues, even though every day we rose her up and told her how wonderful, how beautiful, how great she was and what she had to provide for this world. She met a boy who was a huge influence, more of an influence than we were, unfortunately, and he introduced her to drugs because that's what took her pain away. I could show you numerous studies and reports that validate addiction, but you've already seen that. If the mindset and stigma continues to stay as it is, and we continue to treat those with addiction as criminals and useless citizens, well then we better start cutting down more trees because we're going to need to make more room for grave sites. Those addicted already feel worthless, helpless, and defeated. Society and communities contributing to perpetuate those feelings does not solve the problems associated with addiction. We all need to start realizing and start talking about the facts every day to everyone we come in contact with. It takes one use of heroin to become addicted. Prescription drugs, by the third pill, your receptors in the brain are starting to change and convincing your body that it needs more. By the fifth pill, you're typically addicted, if you have, as we've heard, that kind of genetic makeup. People will argue that and say that drugs don't hijack the brain and change those things. And for those people, I say, count your blessings, because you are one of the few that have not become addicted after being on prescription drugs. A lot of times people will stop taking their pain medication and they'll feel bad and they'll think that they need to take more and convince themselves that their pain and ailment is because of what they originally got the prescription for. Sadly, what they don't realize is they're going through withdrawals. But most of us won't believe that because we come from good families. It was prescribed from our doctor. How could we be going through this horrible thing called withdrawals? So they take another pill and they feel better, and then the cycle begins. It's just that quick and that easy. Narcotics are not antibiotics. You do not have to take all of them to feel better. People sadly think that. In 1 year, drug overdoses killed more Americans than the entire Vietnam War. President Trump shared with the nation just recently that this epidemic was like having 9/11 happen every 3 weeks. Those statistics are just unbelievable to me. So what do we do now? How do we prevent another mom or dad from having to stand up here like I am and talk about the most devastating news that they got about their child, that they overdosed and died? There are just no words that I can express to you to explain that pain I feel every single day. First and foremost is prevention. We need to educate and bombard our youth about drugs and addiction. We have to show them the raw truth about their choice of using drugs. Just telling them to say no and showing them some pictures of what could possibly happen just isn't enough anymore. We need real-life experience programs in middle schools and high schools. We need basically a scared straight drug prevention program. Once they get addicted, the battle to get clean is long and hard. And if they make it to heroin, and most do, because heroin is $10 for a hit of heroin, it's cheap. If they make it to that point, their chance of dying is greater than their chance of getting clean and living. So we can't let them get to that point. Secondly, we need therapeutic comprehensive drug courts. Maddie was in and out of jail for multiple things related to larceny and things to pay for the drugs, sadly. We need to stop treating addicts as criminals and more like sick individuals who need help. People think that mandated rehab is letting the addicts off easy and not giving them consequences for their crimes. I promise you, rehab is more difficult and life-changing than jail. When given the choice of which one, a lot of times an addict will choose jail. It's easier. People also think that until an addict wants help, rehab won't work. Yes, some are lucky enough to get to that point in realization in their life that they need rehab and they need help, and I'm so grateful for those people. I heard so many times that until Maddie hit rock bottom, she would never get better. I'm here to tell you that rock bottom is death for a drug addict, so we cannot wait. That mentality, again, will get us more deaths. I am a board member, as was mentioned, of Phoenix Rising of Winston-Salem, which is a nonprofit group that funds drug court in Forsyth County. They had that years ago, and it was cut because of money. As most of you know, that's usually the problem with everything, it's money. However, that drug court is going to be hopefully up and running in October. We are moving in a positive direction, just slowly. Through the years, I begged judges to please help and mandate treatment for Maddie. It wasn't that we weren't trying, but our voice just wasn't strong enough, unfortunately. They never would, and they always sent Maddie to jail instead. Once, we told the judge that jail would not help her addiction problems and tried to show him why. He made the comment, well, she will at least be clean for the day she's locked up. He had no compassion and no care or understanding for the long-term and true welfare of Maddie or anyone else that came through that courtroom that day with charges for crimes to pay for their drugs. We had a small window of opportunity that came one day during court. Maddie was ready to commit to rehab and wanted desperately to get clean and change her life. She completed the rigorous and long process to get into a 2-year residential rehab program. When addicts decide to get clean, you don't have the luxury of waiting days and weeks for a bed or an approval letter. The treatment center denied Maddie, saying she had a pre-existing medical condition, a medical condition that she took no medication for and would not have interfered with her rehab. Maddie once again felt defeated and cried hysterically at the news. She looked at me, and I will never forget this day. She said, now you see why I can't get clean. Even when I try to get help, I can't. It was at that moment that Maddie's glimpse of hope was shattered into a million pieces. I felt helpless and angry that I couldn't fix this for my daughter. And that when she was really trying, that someone, one person, made the decision to not grant her that opportunity. If she had not been denied that treatment, she would be here today. Please understand that this is not about placing blame or taking away the accountability of Maddie's own decision to initially use. When addicts use, they no longer think rationally. Sadly, the drugs become their decision makers. As I read this part, I would hope you would just look up at Maddie, because these are her words. This timeline is going to be all about my new independent life and my timeline of me achieving all that I have set my heart on. I have a pending charge, no license or car. I'm not in school and still living at home. I work at Taco Bell. But my goal is by the end of this journal, all of that will change. I am done being a screw-up. It is finally my time to shine. That was the last journal entry my daughter wrote on December 5th. Maddie had hopes and dreams of becoming a forensic anthropologist. She wanted to be able to give families answers and closures about their loved ones. None of these things will ever happen. I will forever wear my daughter's ashes and the locket around my heart, around my neck. I will wear the bracelet she gave me the day she went to jail, and will wear it over my heart. And I carry a piece of her hair in a baggie in my pocket that I take out quite often and smell. That's just not okay anymore. My heart is shattered, and my world is destroyed and forever changed. There are successful programs used throughout the nation where results are being seen. We need to get on board and make those things happen here in Randolph County soon. Because if we don't, it just might be your child, your sister, your brother, your friend, or your colleague that we bury next, because no one is immune. August 31st is Drug Awareness Day across the nation. We will be heading to the state capital, Raleigh, to try and educate, promote more awareness, and get legislation to hear our needs for change. It will be a great event with numerous speakers and a powerful and touching tribute for those lost to addiction. I will leave flyers in the back with more information if you'd like to attend the Fed Up rally and show your support. I thank you from the bottom of my heart for this opportunity and hope that change will happen soon. Thank you.
Wow, you know, a real picture's being painted here today of what's going on in our county. And unfortunately, one of the first things to be impacted is our law enforcement, our jails, and our court system. Sheriff Robert Graves is dealing, and the Board of County Commissioners certainly dealing with the issue of expansion of our correctional facility here in the county. The numbers of prisoners that we're getting, it's a real surprise to see the types of people who are winding up at the first line, which is the Randolph County Jail. And Sheriff Robert Graves now will talk to us about impacts on law enforcement.
Well, amen to the testimonials. I appreciate you for having the strength to come forward and talk about those. I know it's extremely difficult, and I appreciate that, and I pray God will continue to comfort you as you go through the healing process. Thank you for that. You know, law enforcement, I think my topic's supposed to be how it affects law enforcement. You know, opioid misuse, addiction oftentimes starts instantly for someone who's had major surgery. We've heard that from the doctors and others here today. If patients if they're not careful, that can become addictive very quickly. Before they know it, the prescription drugs runs out. They're unable to renew their prescriptions, and the availability goes away. When that runs out, unfortunately, it can turn to heroin. Heroin, as we've heard tonight already today, is made from morphine, substance found in opium poppy. Heroin is one of the most addictive drugs around. It's so addictive, it's extremely hard to get off of, as you've heard several times this morning. Most of the time, it's either you go cold turkey, somehow, I don't know if that's possible or not, you get effective treatment down the road, or you die. That's kind of the options that you have. It's very somber, the outcome of it. A lot of times this begins a downward spiral that leads to, and sometimes the underlying case that we see it in law enforcement and certainly coming into our detention facilities, sometimes some of the underlying causes not only through medical issues, but is through mental illness. And sometimes the cause of that is a lack of treatment, not only for mental illness, but for substance abuse. The difficulty in finding treatment facilities, as you've heard from Catherine and others, is hard to find, and if it is, it's extremely expensive. So a lot of people, it's out of their reach financially to even get the facility, the treatment, effective treatment when it is available. Sometimes if the treatment is not available and other options run out, they feel like there's no options left, then it turns to self-treatment. Self-treatment can come in the form of alcohol abuse or substance abuse. Heroin obviously is in that category as well. What goes along with that, the funding. How do you pay for your drugs, whether it's the illegal usually, a lot of times that unfortunately turns into crimes of opportunity. They start property crimes. That's where we see a lot of our property crimes come from, and crimes of opportunity, where you hear a lot of going through parking lots and checking to see if people's doors are locked and grabbing anything they can for quick money or things that they can turn around very quickly to support their habit. Heroin costs an addict between $150 to $250 a day to support it. So if you're not working, then obviously you've got to have the money somewhere. So a lot of times, unfortunately, it turns to crime, and it's usually those petty type crimes or property crimes, which affects us all so bad. This is a lot of times is where they first start their contact with law enforcement. Once they start committing these type of crimes, and then next thing you know, they're in trouble with law enforcement, and it usually leads through the criminal justice system and eventually into our detention center. From this comes a problem with overcrowding at our detention facility. We've been addressing that for the last year with the county commissioners and the manager and others to address this problem. We look at the Stepping Up initiative that we're working on in Randolph County to try to look at ways that we can curb some of this and move people into some type of treatment prior to getting to the stage that they have to be incarcerated. When we look at our raw data from this, from January 1st through the 31st of July, how this report is brought up, some of the criteria is inmates were selected for the report based on this criteria through that time period I just explained. And then it's only custody bookings, inmates that are actually housed in our facility, were selected. The other information is derived from the medical history questionnaire regarding psychiatric care. If they answered yes, that they have been treated at some point. If the inmate has been identified as a mental patient, drug user, or alcohol user on their record. And those are through their questionnaires and other information that comes in. From this report, we found that there were 35 females with an initial arrest within this data range from January 1 to July 31st, meeting those criteria. And of those 35, they were rearrested an additional 87 times after their initial arrest. So they come in and then they meet their bond and before they're gone through the court, and they get out and they're back out there to feel the habit and rearrested. So it's just a vicious cycle there. You know, the same criteria there was 89 males with an additional arrest with the data range, and of those 89 males, they were arrested an additional 197 times after their initial arrest. So you can see it's a vicious cycle that we've got to get a handle of and try to figure out some way to get them some treatment to address those underlying issues that have turned them into, moved them into crime and get them into our facility. We got a lot of things going on in our county with the Sand Hills. We're anxious to see that facility open. We have some inpatient facility there with some beds and other things to try to move some of these people into treatment and before they get to the point that they have to deal with law enforcement. That'll certainly be less cost for the county with our facilities and the officers as well. Plus, if we can save somebody before they get to that point, they won't be to the point where they start a criminal record and all those things and get them turned around. I've met with numerous citizens concerning their children and loved ones. I get calls, and I meet people out at night and other times to talk to them about it and try to meet them and discuss what they can do. And I've been out with people I know, and they've called, and I'll go out and meet them and try to locate their loved ones. Very troubling time for them, and it's a very real problem, and it's very concerning for all of us. We have, since we've talked about it a little bit this morning, we've debated about this for some time, and through our collaborative efforts we've started with the health department and others, the informational things we're doing, we have elected, our officers are going to start carrying the naloxone as the end of next week. Emergency services is going to be providing our training for our officers next week. We were able to gain some funding for this, so it's no cost for the county to offer this product for our officers to carry. Number one is if it can save one person, it'll be worth it. And number two, it's a safety factor for our officers because they get exposed to this, could have possible exposures to jeopardize their safety as well. So we have a two-edged sword on that, and so we will be offering that service at completion of next week once the officers are trained. We also, when an inmate leaves our facility, we provide them with some information about services that are available in our community, whether it's substance abuse or mental health or other things, to make sure they have that when they leave. Hopefully they'll look at it, but we are trying our best to at least provide that information to them as they leave. Drop boxes, we do have drop boxes all around the county, and certainly encourage people through education and press releases that we do to encourage people to turn in unused medications, clean out their cabinets at home, and if you have someone that may have died in your family and they've been serious illnesses or have strong narcotics or drugs in their house, please come in and turn them in before they get in the hands of our young people. Educational piece, we this year, we do the CARE and DARE programs. We've been doing for years. Certainly the DARE program in 5th grade, talking about drug awareness eradication efforts. We have been having some discussions about that, and feel like it's a long time between the 5th grade and 12th grade where they leave in high school. So we are this year going to be implementing through our SROs at our upper grades to sort of a refresher about substance abuse and other things, to try to bring it back up to them, bring it back to the forefront. And we'll be talking about these things that we're talking about today as well, with opioids and other substances that can be harmful to them, to try to just get it back on their mind, because it's so important, and it's a long time there. So we'll be doing that this year through our SROs in our schools to offer that service as well, to try to reach our children and the young people to help them. It's very concerning to us. This is certainly a health issue in our county and a safety issue in our county. We're very concerned about it, and our officers work hard every day out here to eradicate these drugs from our county. We've had a lot of great success, but in a lot of drug arrests and those things, but it's still out there. We still have a lot of work to do, and we're not going to deter in our efforts in that manner as well, but we certainly want to be on the forefront of trying to do what we can on the preventive side to assist our citizens to meet them before they get to that point in their lives. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sheriff. Sheriff Grace, one of the numbers, out of 97 inmates that were arrested since January that were identified with drug and mental issues and alcohol abuse, they were rearrested 258 times. Now listen to that number, 90-some and 250-some, same people. That's a vicious cycle that the law enforcement and the court system are involved in. And Andy Gregson, our district attorney, is a long history of prosecuting in Randolph County, and he is so aware of that vicious cycle, and he does so much in addition to being district attorney to try to break that.
Good morning. We've been at it a while. If you want to, stand up a second, stretch. I'm not going to be long. I have a feeling you'll receive me a little better if you get a stretch. Thank you so much. I'm probably the most popular speaker right there for that little thing right there. I want to apologize to start with. Some of what I say is going to seem harsh. As a prosecutor, a career prosecutor, almost 30 years now, 27 years, 23 in this county, sometimes you realize that you have to speak truth. You try to speak in love like the Bible commands, but you got to speak truth, okay? So I apologize at the outset. Nothing I say is meant to undermine or disparage any of the speakers that have gone before me. I've actually had someone in my family, extended family, die of a heroin overdose, leaving 2 small children. 27 years I've dealt with victims of crime. Unfortunately, some murder cases. Just finished one last year where a totally innocent woman lost her only daughter to a man who was seriously addicted to opioids, and that was the driving force for his murder of her and another person. So nothing I say is intended to be without mercy or understanding. However, I will tell you that there's no question. We've sat here and listened to unassailable facts that cannot be denied. We have a serious problem in Randolph County. As your DA, I will not apologize for prosecuting people regardless of their motive when they commit serious crimes against innocent people. If in 4 years you choose for me not to be your DA because of that stance, I can live with it. But we will not excuse crime, especially crimes against persons that is serious in nature, because of the underlying reason for the commission of those crimes, and I will not apologize for that. Because sometimes we have to sit across victims who have been raped, murdered, robbed, and the person who committed those crimes did it because of their addiction. So there is another side to that, okay? So again, I apologize for having to say that, but we will not apologize. Now what we will do, and we have done, and we will continue to do, is we will try to do justice, because that's the job of the DA. The DA's job, we take an oath, we're commanded to do justice. Sometimes doing justice means that we help the court craft a sentence that helps that person overcome their addiction and not repeat it. And we do that all the time. It is a myth that we imprison people for simply possessing illegal drugs. I think we had a judge here, we've had some other people. The whole system is designed to keep those people out of prison because it is not beneficial. There's too many of them. So what we do is we put them on probation, we put them on deferred prosecution, we put them on programs where they have a chance to get out of the addiction with no criminal history. That is built into the law. It's also built into our discretion. And I can tell you as your DA, we exercise that discretion every single day trying to help these people. But at some point, they will cross a line, and I will not apologize for drawing clear lines. When they cross that line, they will be prosecuted. Now, the court can take their addiction into account when they craft the sentence, but my office will not excuse them for committing the crime. Second, I want to say to you that the most disturbing slide that's been put up here, which is totally unacceptable, is Ms. Hayes' slide that there were 87, I think, pills for every man, woman, and child in this county. That is a clear indicator of criminal activity. Somebody is abusing their authority in the prescriptions. I can tell you that in our office, we are already beginning to have a discussion with law enforcement. We are going to investigate and prosecute those providers. That is driving a big part of our problem. What happened is, I'm glad the doctor spoke about it, we had no heroin problem to speak of in this county until about 8 years ago. It was primarily in High Point. Historically, we had some heroin, not much. When the medical community overprescribed opioids and opiates, what happened was we began to clamp down on those providers, and so these addicts who are unfortunately now addicted to this opioid drug, they switched to heroin. So we created a market. This is primarily a man-made problem. And so we are going to begin to target the prescribers who are abusing their position. I'm personally going to have a sit down with the new U.S. Attorney, and I'm going to ask the federal government to do their job. They primarily have the job of regulating the medical professionals that write prescriptions. They have the databases, they know who are overprescribing. There is no statistical reason why Mecklenburg should be 30 pills per resident and we should be 87. Statistically, there's no explanation for that. Those people need to be prosecuted and brought before the court. If we have anything to do with it, they will be. Number two, I can commend our sheriff and our chief of police who are sitting here. Their vice units are going after the people who are bringing the large quantities of heroin into our community. Now, this is maybe politically incorrect. If you know me, I'm sorry. The federal government needs to do their job. For a long time, they have allowed open borders. They have allowed the vast majority of our heroin, these law enforcement professionals will tell you, are coming across our borders, primarily our southern borders. They are being brought here by cartels. Now, our law enforcement, Sheriff Graves, all of our chief of police, are really putting resources into going after those high-level traffickers. Our legislature has given us some good tools to punish those traffickers and those sellers, and we intend to work together to target those individuals and hopefully to take them off the street. The STOP Act that our legislature, I think we've got 2 or 3 legislators here, they should be commended. That STOP Act is an excellent piece of legislation. They worked hard on that. It's a very progressive piece of legislation. Hopefully that's going to cut down on some of this overprescribing that has been driving the crisis that we have. I am encouraged that we seem to have an administration that is serious about border security and serious about using the federal prosecutorial discretion that they have. We seem to now have an open dialogue with the U.S. Attorney's Office. They're also catching up to speed on this problem. I think we're going to be collaborating with them a little more as well. So I am encouraged that meetings like this are occurring. I really want to commend Susan Hayes for taking a leadership in starting a task force. We've been meeting for several months. Law enforcement has been going to meetings about this for probably a year, and we've had discussions with our legislators. I do think that we are a community that does love our people. I really hope going forward that the religious community will be a part of this dialogue. Because at its core, this is a spiritual crisis. This is people who are looking for a void to be filled in their lives. And I think we will be remiss if we do not include our churches, all of our churches, across denominations. They're on the front lines. They are dealing with these people. They see the crises in their lives. They can help us respond. I hope that we will include them in this dialogue. I apologize if I seem blunt to you. Seems like I tell my wife all the time she gets to be the grace and I have to be the law. It's just my lot in life. I have 3 boys. But it is the role that I sought, I asked for, I ran for, and I took an oath to do. So I assure you that we are open to all suggestions. I assure you that we are working with your law enforcement and your legislators. But we ask as a community that you help us. I'm going to put a plug in here at the end. Every jury session that we have, we struggle to get jurors. People avoid it at all costs. Now I get it. I've been trying cases for a long, long time. It's not fun to come up there and spend a week trying cases and be a juror. I get it. Most people don't get paid to do it. But it's a part of our civic duty. It's a part of being a citizen. And we desperately need your common sense and your life experiences sitting on those jurors when we pull somebody up and try them for sale and delivery of heroin or trafficking in heroin. If all the good people get out of jury duty, who are we left with? Exactly. And it takes all 12 to get a unanimous verdict. So I ask you to do your civic duty, serve your community when called upon. Keep this in the forefront of your mind. Work with us. I assure you that all your elected officials are on board with this, and we have the same goal. I am really open to any suggestions or questions that you have. My number's out there. You can walk in the office and talk to me. I really do thank you for listening to me.
The front line of Randolph County government on child protection and all the components that make that up is the Department of Social Services. Over 180 employees. Beth Duncan is the director of Randolph County Department of Social Services. Beth.
Good morning, and thank you for your interest in having this very timely but very hard conversation. The Randolph County Department of Social Services administers over 30 programs, and the subject of substance abuse intersects with every single one of them. However, in the next few minutes, let us just focus on two of the main areas that are impacted the most, and that is the Child Protective Services and the Child Foster Care Program. Historically, local departments of social services answered community concerns about nasty homes, dirty houses, that might pose a health risk to the children. Nowadays, more often than not, the calls come to our attention and they have a component of substance abuse and domestic violence resulting in abuse or neglect of the children in the home. The best place for children is in families who provide a nurturing environment, safe from abuse and neglect. General statutes say that the SS is to preserve and stabilize family life, and that is something that we strive to do every day. Families are the cornerstone of our community. Opioids are devastating families and their ability to maintain that safe and nurturing environment for children. Our agency has seen a huge increase in drug withdrawals in newborns, and parental substance abuse is a factor in about 80% of our out-of-home placements for children. Because we are diligent in helping families heal, we partner with them as much as possible. We work with biological families to keep the family intact. When it is no longer safe for that child to remain in their own home, we petition the juvenile court system to allow placement of the child with a trusted guardian or a nurturing family member. If that type of placement is not possible, then the child is placed into foster care. Our child protection social workers are often referred to as community first responders. We are on the front lines. Our response time to investigate reports of abuse or neglect is dependent upon the severity of the allegations contained in the report from the community. After that, a case decision must be made within 45 days regarding the incoming allegations. Sometimes the allegations are unsubstantiated. Sometimes the allegations are found to be true. And the social workers strive to get the necessary services in place to rebuild that family foundation. Many of the services necessary for treatment and recovery are funded by federal and state dollars through the Medicaid insurance program. There are 5 key aspects of treatment and recovery that impact social services, as well as the ability for families to be successful in their treatment and recovery. These social determinants play a role in the overall health, safety, and well-being of children. It is important for families to have access to and transportation to treatment services. Clean drug screens, stable income or parental employment, and stable housing are things that one would expect in a nurturing environment for children. In the absence of a safe and stable environment for a child with their family, or our legal department petitions the court for custody of the child when that's not possible. When custody is granted by the judge and the child is likely placed in foster care at that point in time. Once a child is placed in foster care, the parents may lose their eligibility for Medicaid insurance coverage, and that is one of the single most difficult barriers that the parents themselves have to overcome, and that is the ability to have access to the treatment. They have no way to pay for it. And that impedes their ability to get treatment and to stay clean. As you can see here, a good deal of money is spent on drug testing parents involved in child protective services and the foster care system. In state fiscal year 14-15, that's 3 years ago, we spent over $36,000 in Randolph County on drug testing the parents that we're working with. 15-16, we spent over $35,000. And last year we spent over $28,000. Our projected cost, and this is, it says county cost, but that is county, state, and federal dollars, in child protection is going to cost us over $2 million. Foster care is going to cost us over $3 million. I want to just kind of give you some anecdotal pieces of information from some of our staff at social services. I asked them how it impacted our agency and the clients that they serve, and here's some of the things that they said. For DSS, the use of opioids has increased, but overall drug and alcohol abuse that results in our involvement with families has remained steady. What we see is a movement of the drug of choice or drug of opportunity from year to year. It used to be methamphetamine, now it's the heroin. Of course, the ability to make a singular mistake that turns fatal when abusing opioids creates a high-risk situation for the abuser and the public in general. The number of screened-in referrals in CPS has remained steady over the past 3 years at 1,166 for state fiscal year 16-17, and the number of children in foster care is also relatively steady at an average of 111, and that's for last year. In our non-emergency transportation and foster care visitation area, our volunteer drivers transport an average of 5 customers per month at least 3 times per week to treatment for opioid addiction. Last year, they completed 526 trips for this service. Since June of 2016, we have had requests and scheduled 19 weekly visits for children and their parents where their children were taken into custody due to a drug issue, mainly the opioids. And these are the visits that we are often court-ordered to set up between the biological family and their child. Those visits usually take place at the Department of Social Services. Referrals, here's another one that someone said. Referrals from children being born positive at birth to parents dying from an overdose, or parents passing out behind the steering wheel with a syringe still tied to their arm while transporting their children are some of the things that we see. From our adoption social work supervisor, she said, if an infant is born positive, he or she usually requires more care and can suffer from extreme fussiness, tremors, and issues with feeding. If an older child comes into care due to substance abuse in the family, they may have behavioral issues, lack of structure and boundaries, and issues stemming from chronic neglect. Both of these situations can present problems when trying to place these children or find an adoptive home for the child based on the amount of care and intense supervision that is required to meet their needs. Once adopted, these issues may require extra services, therapy, and as well, which is also very, very costly. A lot of the substance abuse treatment programs are just offering the client Suboxone or methadone treatment and not truly following up or offering additional support such as therapy, Therapy is needed to treat the underlying problems that's causing our clients to turn to drugs. From the Medicaid area, the statement here is that they have noticed the number of children living with grandparents or other family members increasing due to the parents having addiction problems. Another Medicaid supervisor said they are aware their clients are telling them that certain doctors are chosen by our clients because they will prescribe whatever you ask for. Over the last year, we have experienced the death of one parent as a direct result of a heroin overdose. I was in court, and when the judge called for that particular parent, the DSS attorney stood up and said, he died. And it was the night before. I didn't know that until I got to court that day. Some of the children that we serve have witnessed a parent overdose. Others have had needles within reach, and some verbalize fear that their parent will die from their drug use. From the adult services area, you've heard it mentioned, we have elderly people addicted to painkillers, and they seem to believe that if the doctor gives it to them, it's okay, but they over-medicate themselves. These are hidden users and abusers. Also from adult services, a number of the clients that we have in adult services that we work with are getting this type of medication, and their adult children and or grandchildren begin stealing those medications for their own benefit or their use because they have an addiction issue. In summary, I just want to thank you on behalf of the Department of Social Services. It is very important that we partner together to empower, protect, educate, and promote stability in our community. If we as a community care anything at all about these families and these children, we will work together to solve these complex issues ahead of us. Today is a fantastic start, and I thank you very much.
Public school systems are a reflection of the community that they serve. They're a reflection of our society. And Dr. Stephen Gainey, with our county superintendent of schools, will talk about the impact.
I just want to start by saying thank you. I came to this community July 1, 2013 was my first day of work. I started hanging around, I guess, about April or May of that year after I've been named superintendent. And what I've stressed to myself, and I've tried my best without being too overbearing with staff, is that we need to be a partner in this community. It wasn't the school system and the rest of the community. It wasn't the commissioners and the rest of the community. It was a partnership. There were everybody and us going to the commissioners for things, but then being on our own the rest of the time. It was a partnership. So I will tell you right now, after sitting here for about 2+ hours or however long we've been in here, I'm really proud of what I've heard, and I'm really honored to be able to stand here and talk to you, because I don't know that I'm anywhere in the class of the speakers, but I'm going to tell you what we're trying to do, because we're in the business about kids. We're in the business about taking care of kids at all costs. That's what I signed on to 24 years ago. Take care of kids, look out for them, love them. They may not be yours, but love them as hard as you can and take care of them. I also want to thank one of my partners, Terry Worrell, who's sitting here, because a lot of things I'm going to say today, they're doing in Ashburn City system as well, one way or another. She and I have a common thread. We've both been high school principals. We've seen a lot of things you've talked about. We've hurt behind our office doors as high school principals, assistant superintendents, and now superintendents. So I also want to thank, even though I work directly with the Sheriff's Department, thank you, Sheriff Graves, Jody Williams, I appreciate you too. I live in Ashburn. So when I'm not at work, I see your great guys at work, and it's a pleasure and a thrill to see what I see going on in this community. So Ms. Hayes, when she called me and asked me would I speak, I wasn't really sure what I was going to say. and I broke it down into 3 questions. What is our current situation? When did we decide to respond? And how are we responding? So she asked me, talk about the perspective of opioid addiction and abuse from our school system's perspective. Tell us what's going on there. Well, I talked with my staff, and we were talking, and so here's our 3 questions. What is our current situation? And we talked. I don't know that I have a report that's come across my desk that said, Stephen, you lost this child because of opioid addiction or abuse. I don't have that stat. What I can tell you is, how can all this affect us? Well, we have 17,039 students we're expecting to see on the 28th of August. We have 2,324 staff members. Last I looked, we were the largest employer in the county. All of those individuals are also members of the community. So if something happens with this crisis, it's likely to touch us, because we also have 34,000 parents attached to these 17,000 kids. Very proud of that. Very proud of that responsibility. But let me tell you where I see some of this that can affect us. What is our current situation? Well, attendance. It's not all about the students. It could be our staff, late to work, not showing up for work. Mental health, physical health. We know what all that entails. Behavior. It's very troubling when you start seeing the behaviors influenced by some of these crises. Behaviors from students to students, students at staff, staff at students, staff at staff. Temperament and patience. All of a sudden you see, you see these children and individuals with erratic behaviors. They have lack of patience. They're irritable. They're on edge. Concentration. You know, I remember very clearly, I was also a middle school principal, and I remember very clearly, you start seeing things happen with kids' performance, and you wonder. And you go out to a student parking lot after school as a high school principal, and you watch it empty out, and you watch groupings of students, and you wonder. And then you have that parent come in your office. This was the thing I wasn't ready for as a high school principal. And folks, I love the kids I was their principal. I love the place I was at. I wasn't ready for that parent to come in and say, my kid's caught up in something. Can you help? I don't know where else to go. You can see it. Concentration. They're losing concentration in academics. Or you may have staff members. All of a sudden, they're not planning like they were. They're not on that A game you've seen them on for 3 or 4 years. They may be having a problem. Are there lesson plans? Are there lesson plans where they used to be? Are the kids studying at home, or is it all whatever they do at school is at the end of the academic experience for them? Finances. I worry about that. How can this influence our kids? Is a child going without food and clothes because mom or dad's involved in one of these crises? And then the extracurricular activities. All of a sudden you have these great athletes, great band members, and they're just not interested anymore. We had these great employees, and they're just not interested in leading these groups anymore. That's how this whole crisis can start affecting us. And there's many other ways, but we are a big player in society, whether we want to be or not. We're responsible for that part of society. So the next question, when did our school system decide to respond? Well, I don't know that there's an exact starting point. We've been involved with middle school and high school health classes, drug prevention discussions. We've been involved with the Sheriff's Department with the DARE program. We've been watching the heightened awareness of what's going on in society. We've been watching this, and yes, it seems to have picked up recently. And I'm going to say one other thing. In January of 2017, I was sitting in my office one night about 9 o'clock, and a lot of people know, they know when they can get me. And this individual I've worked with a while now, 4 years. Gary Cook called me, board chair. He said, Stephen, I want to talk to you about something. Now, I didn't know what he wanted to talk about, but been a very good mentor of mine. And he said, what do you think's going on with this opioid issue? And I said, it's out there. We're watching it. Marty Trotter, Wynn Ashworth, Aaron Starr, 3 of my staff members have been very involved watching things. And he said, I think it's time we talk about it as a Board of Education. I said, agreed. Be back with you on what we're going to talk about. So, March 2017, Marty Trotter did a presentation. He talked about what we are doing, and then he laid out some things we're going to do moving forward. So, that's kind of the wind, but the wind stretches way back to predecessors. There's been some great individuals sitting in my seat, and they built a great foundation for our school system. And so to say it started with that phone call would be inaccurate. It would not be appropriate for the great leaders that preceded me. So, but things are ramping up. So how is our school system going to respond to it? Well, let's look at 16, 17. Little cumbersome, but just to kind of give you a flavor. I've heard this about the education. I heard the parent talk about let's educate, and I agree. So we do participate in Red Ribbon Week. That's a time when kids wear red ribbons, staff does, in my opinion, in opposition to drug abuse. They have such days, themes such as put a cap on drugs, everybody gets to wear a hat. Sock out drugs, everybody wears crazy socks. The kids love that, but you'll see in a minute some things we're concerned about with that. Are we doing a dress-up week, or are we really educating here? National Prevention Week. That's in May. Red Ribbon Week's in October 23 through 31. National Prevention Week is a series of days, has everything from prevention of youth tobacco use, prevention of suicide, and the Wednesday of that week talks about prescription misuse, prescription drug misuse, and opioid misuse. So we kicked into gear there with some lessons being taught at the elementary school, middle school, and high schools. We had lessons for grades K2, grades 3, 5, 6, 8, 9, 12. And the middle schools did it during their health classes, elementary school teachers worked it through their classes, and the high school principals designated time for it to go through their classes. But we're ramping up this year. We're learning. That community collaborative meeting that the health department has sponsored this year, we've had staff going to that. Student services staff, Marty Trotter, Assistant Superintendent for Operations, has been going. We're trying to learn what we can learn. Strategies, ideas. Marty's shared with me the syringe exchange speaker and the medicine drop box speaker. And just, we can't sit on the sideline. And we're not going to. There's limits what we can do, but we have partners all up and down this stage and out in this crowd today. Law enforcement, we've continued to work the DARE program. If you've never been to a DARE graduation, call me one day and I'll put you in the car and we'll go to one. Talk about kids looking at adults and seeing what's happened between the adults and those law enforcement officers over the course of the program. It is quite fascinating, Sheriff Graves. It's quite fun. It's quite fun to watch a sheriff get in front of little kids. And kids, they're really not into him having a badge or a gun. I watched that. I mean, it's great. It's great that you got the gun and the badge, but they're listening. And sometimes I get kind of lost, and I go to probably 4, 5, 6 of those a year. Because I think the Sheriff's Department they need my support because of the extra effort they do with those programs. Here's 2 programs that we attended, again, trying to learn. In May of 17, Randolph Community College. Bob Shackford hosted that. And then we had another event on the opioid crisis in Greensboro. We sent school nurses, social workers, counselors, student services staff. We're trying to learn what is going on. What could impact our kids? Is there something we can do more? So going into 17, 18, we're going to ramp up some things. Red Ribbon Week, we like the themes. We're not going to take the themes away, but we're going to force the education. We're going to try to push that curriculum, that education level even harder. We've sent targeted lesson plans that will go to the schools with the expectation that they're taught. We're going to continue with the community collaborative meetings, just trying to learn as much as we can, trying to be participants in that community arena. Law enforcement, it was mentioned, as I think Sheriff Graves, you were talking during Red Ribbon Week, we're planning on high school, middle schools, our SROs teaching at least one lesson, if not more, trying to bring that back to those high school, middle schools after the exit from the DARE program. We're looking to Find ways to help parents. And this has always been a struggle of mine. When I was a high school principal, particularly middle school principal, I don't remember it quite as much, but the high school principal are trying to give their kids, the parents trying to give their kids a little bit more freedom, and their kids are obviously running with it because they're getting ready to head on their own. But if we can get to the parents with some information sessions after hours, we're going to. And we're going to try to work with PTOs and some open house events. We may miss some of those, but you know, there are things mid-year because of being on the block schedule where there are events that we may be able to grab some parents. But we need to make sure before we go there, we're prepared and it's worthwhile and it's accurate and it's useful for these parents. We're going to continue to work to help our staff members. Into my first year here, summer of 14, I was sitting in my office one night and I said, I'm really concerned about some of the health issues kids have. And I can't assume that first year teacher with all he or she has on them really might think something's going on when a kid's lips start swelling or something like that. So we went to the health department and here's our partner. I need some help. I want some little trainings that we could ask every staff member to watch every year. I don't want them to be the authority and the medical doctor. I just want them to know if they see something unusual going on, call us. Call the principal, get somebody down there. I'm the principal that watched as we had a child fall out of his chair the first day back from Christmas break. January 2006, I'm the principal that got the great opportunity to see the AED work. That wasn't a lot of fun. I'm the principal who got the call about 2 months later from Duke University. Kid's name was Jack, I won't tell you his last name, and saw his mom's name on my caller ID. And she said, when I picked up the phone, I looked at my wife, I said, he's passed away. He's been in the hospital. She said, Dr. Gainey, Jack just opened his eyes, and the next thing he says, where's Dr. Gainey? Because somehow Jack knew I was right around him when he got taken out of our building. We got to make sure our staff knows at least what to look for to get to the counselors so we can get these kids help, and we're going to keep working at it. Increased emphasis on National Prevention Week. Again, we're going to be more targeted. We're not going to leave it open-ended as much at the school level. We're going to try to be more prescriptive without tying people's hands on some of these activities. We don't want to take away the enthusiasm, but we need to get the education level up. So I'll tell you, I deeply love this county. I deeply love the Randolph County school system and every kid, parent, teacher, and staff member and community member that is associated with it. And we're going to do our part, and we're not perfect. And I heard both of these testimonials. We're not perfect, but I've witnessed what you've dealt with as a parent, and once you witness it, you don't turn your back on it. So thank you for letting me be a part of today.
Ashley Duggins is a pharmacist. She owns an owner and operator of a local pharmacy, has her doctorate in pharmacy from UNC Chapel Hill. And she's, and equally as important, she's active in the public health environment of Randolph County.
Good morning. Thank you guys so much for letting me be here today. So first of all, I want to talk about what we've been talking about all morning, and that's the statistics about how these opioid problems has really affected our community. So if you'll see the first statistic there, this is basically saying that there has been a 391% increase in the overall death rates in North Carolina, which is staggering. There's also information there about poisoning deaths. We've heard that all morning. 93% were caused by drugs and medication. And 47% of those deaths resulted from prescription pain medication, heroin, or cocaine. So we've heard this all morning. It's here. It's happening. And as a result of that, the STOP Act was passed, and we've heard a lot about that this morning in June. But I do want to point out two things in the STOP Act that I think are really important. First of all, this STOP Act is going to require prescribers and pharmacists to check the prescription database before prescribing or dispensing opioids. And this is huge to me. We currently use this database, and I'm going to talk about it in a moment, how it has really helped us, but I'm excited that this is going to be mandatory, that people are going to be required to do this. I think another big issue is the 5-day limit on initial prescriptions for acute pain. So if you have a patient that has a sprained ankle, a hurt knee, they're only going to be allowed to get a 5-day medication. Instead of a prescriber giving 60 to 120 hydrocodone or Percocet, it's going to be very limited. So those prescribers are going to, or the patient is going to be required to go back to that prescriber to get more medication. And I think this is very important. So now I want to spend a moment talking about the North Carolina Controlled Substance Reporting System. Again, we've heard about it. But this is a statewide reporting system that allows anyone that's going to prescribe a medication, and for me as a pharmacist, to review this medication. We do have to report the data, and it's all on Schedule 2 through Schedule 5. Now, a Schedule 2 medication would be your oxycodone, your Percocet, your hydrocodone, and a 3 through 5 would be stuff like tramadol, Xanax, Valium. So those are reported in that database. Doctors, pharmacists, veterinarians, dentists can register for the system. It's optional. And we also need to be checking before we write that prescription or before we fill that prescription about that. I use it on a daily basis at my pharmacy. Currently, pharmacists are required to upload at least 72 hours after that controlled substance is filled, but September the 1st, that's going to be at the end of a 24-hour period. So we're certainly going to get more real-time data on that. So when I get a prescription into my pharmacy, I've never seen the patient. Maybe it's a regular patient that I see, but this is a new medication for them. I'm going to go right to this database. That database is going to tell me, do they have multiple different addresses? With that date of birth, are they going by different names? It's also going to tell me where they've been shopping. Have they been at other pharmacies? How many doctors are they seeing? So many times this has been a very useful tool for me. I've had the uncomfortable situation before of looking at this database and it being a prescription from an emergency room, and that physician may have prescribed 30 hydrocodones. And when I look at the database, I see that they may have gotten 120 Percocets 2 days before that. When I call that physician, when I call that emergency room, most of the time when I tell them the situation, they ask me to shred that prescription. But I'm faced with going in front of that patient and saying, I'm sorry, but I know that you got 120 yesterday and I can't fill this. So that is very uncomfortable. Sometimes it can be a bit frightening. So I'm thankful that the STOP Act is in place so that people will be required to look at this, will be able to really see what's going on and use it to the fullest so that we can prevent a lot of this. As you can see, over the past couple years, the use of this drug monitoring system has really grown. However, I think in the next few years, this will definitely be more prevalent and people will be using it a whole lot more. And I think this will really serve as a very useful tool. The next thing I want to talk about is naloxone, and I know we've heard a lot about that today. We've also talked about the two of the different forms. On the left-hand side is an Avizio, and I kind of think of this as almost like an EpiPen. It's an auto-injector. This is available by prescription only. Narcan on the right is the nasal spray. And as we've also talked about, this was in June of 2016, North Carolina has the standing order for pharmacists to dispense this. So we have this on our shelf at the pharmacy. We've surveyed some pharmacies locally to see if they are dispensing it. And so we are using it. You know, we can have a family member come in and say, hey, my dad, I'm just really worried about him. Is this something that you can dispense for me? And so we are able to do that. A couple things that really worries me about that is the cost of the medication. It is very costly. Another issue that we're seeing is that doctors are prescribing the Avizio for patients who are on long-term narcotics, but we're having a lot of kickback from insurance companies who are not wanting to pay for it. So it is very costly. A lot of people can't afford that. And it is very concerning that a lot of the naloxone that you're dispensing in an emergency room setting is Medicaid patients. And currently Medicaid does not cover these products. So that is very concerning. Currently, there are 1,358 pharmacies who are on this standing order. I think that needs to be more. I think we should be able to have this in every single pharmacy in North Carolina. And as the Board of Pharmacy reported in 2016, there are 2,022 pharmacies in North Carolina. So we really need to get this word out that this is available, that it needs to be carried in every pharmacy. Ms. Hayes and her wonderful staff at the health department, we've been working on a project for drop boxes, and I know you've heard a lot about that today as well. Currently, there are drop boxes around Randolph County. The one that I most commonly refer to is Randolph County Sheriff's Department. If I have a customer that comes in and says, hey, I have all this drug left over, what do I do with it? That's the first place I'm going to send them. There's no paperwork, there's no questions asked, it's right there in the foyer. The police department at Ashburn and Archdale, as well as Liberty and Randleman, do have these drop boxes. But what I do experience from some patients is almost the fear. Oh goodness, you know, what am I dropping in there? There's some concern there. So we've really been working hard with the health department to create some drop boxes in local pharmacies. So this is a project that we've been working on. I'd like to recognize two of my students that are here today. Mark and Alicia, would you stand up? Alicia is from UNC School of Pharmacy, and Mark is also from Wingate University, and they've been helping me really survey independent pharmacies in town. Would you be interested in having a drop box? How would this affect your pharmacy? And we're really working towards getting these drop boxes in pharmacies, so when we have the question multiple times a week, what do I do with this unused medication? There's a safe place for them to put it. A lot of the questions that I get are, you know, I got this Percocet or I got this hydrocodone for a surgery and I've got so much left over, what do I do with it? So this is a great opportunity. Also, patients that may have a family member under hospice care, they oftentimes get the big care packages and they're left with a lot of that after they pass away. Get rid of it. We want a safe place. We want more places to drop these unused medications. So in the survey, some of the things that we looked at was how often are you dispensing naloxone? And this is, again, just independent pharmacies in Randolph County. We discovered that 75% had dispensed it and 25% had not. We also discovered that 50% are using a standing order for naloxone, but the other 50% are not. We also talked about what are some of the obstacles that you faced in dispensing naloxone. And a lot of the issues surrounding that were patients not really understanding what it is, how it's used. Maybe their doctor didn't talk about it to them. So again, I think this is an issue. And as I said before, insurance coverage or prior authorizations on some of these medications is a big issue. Also, we asked, how have you been affected by it? And I think all pharmacists in this area have been affected by it. We have customers, we have patients, we have family members of those patients who have been affected by it. So we also are very aware of the situation and see it on a daily basis. So going forward, some of the local goals that I really feel as a community that we should do is really strengthen the communication between a pharmacist and the physicians. A situation that I've had a couple weeks ago, I had a patient who was given 2 prescriptions, one for oxycodone and then an additional prescription for short-acting oxycodone. So they had the OxyContin prescription and they also had the short-acting oxycodone. They also had 5 other medications. Some of those were psych meds, some of those were antidepressants, and one was a blood pressure medication. So I had this patient come into my pharmacy, they presented all the prescriptions, and when my cashier goes to check them out, they only want the oxycodone. They don't want the psych meds, they don't want the antidepressants, they don't want the blood pressure pills. And so I'm faced with speaking with that customer, and my response is always, you know, if you're going to get this, you have to get the other stuff or I'm not going to fill it. So pharmacists really need to take a stand. We need to make sure that we're watching over our patients and we need to make sure we're communicating with physicians. Physicians write those prescriptions, but they don't always know that they get those prescriptions filled if it's something other than their narcotics. But it's happening and we're seeing it. So we really want to join together. We really want to make sure that we're working together for these patients, that we're encouraging them to take the other medications along with their pain medications. It's very important. Second of all, I really want to educate the community, and Ms. Hayes is with me on this, about naloxone. A lot of people don't know about it, and unfortunately there is a stigma associated with it. I've had the opportunity to speak to family members who, you know, their mom or their dad or their brother or sister on narcotics, and oftentimes it's, well, that would never happen to me. So I really want that term to be used a lot more. I want the term naloxone. I want it to be talked about. I want people to know that it exists, that it's available. I'm also on the board of directors at URA Charter School, and we are in the current process of getting Narcan available in the schools. There is a free program for that, so I'd love to see that in our high schools just as a precautionary measure. So there is a lot of education about that that really needs to be told to our community. The last thing that we're really working on very hard is the education about safe disposal of medication. So we really want to let people understand, put it away. Don't have it out for your grandkids to see. You know, make sure it's in a safe place. Make sure it's locked up. And also that there are these boxes available many different places in our community to get rid of the unused medication. So in conclusion today, I do want to talk about, I did have a nice conversation with Jay Campbell, who is the Board of Pharmacy Director, and our Sheriff Graves serves also on that Board of Pharmacy. And I asked him, what are some of the concerns that you have as statewide, what are those concerns? First of all, the controlled substance reporting currently does not go over state lines, and that's something that he's really looking at, really wanting to improve. We can only see the controlled substances in North Carolina. We can't see someone that might have been in Florida last week or South Carolina. So we don't see that, and that is a huge problem, and they are working to connect those systems together. Second of all, forgeries. They still happen. Not as much as they used to because of electronic prescriptions, but they're still out there. So patients stealing a prescription pad from a doctor and having a heyday writing narcotics, it happens. And the last thing, robberies and burglaries are on the rise in North Carolina of pharmacies. Jay Campbell reported that he has at least one call a week with this happening. So we want pharmacists to make sure they're keeping their pharmacies safe, that they're keeping their drugs safe, because it can happen. So in conclusion, thank you so much. Thank you for Mr. Johnson, who's really leading this charge, the county commissioners, and for the partnership I have with Ms. Hayes and the health department in working to combat this. Thank you so much.
Our final speaker this morning is Chase Holloman. Chase is a social worker specializing in substance use and recovery. And he's founder of the Guilford County Naloxone Task Force that's comprised of community leaders, concerned community members, and substance use professionals.
Good morning. Good morning. I'll keep my comments brief. I know it's about lunchtime. Thank you for the opportunity to share my experience. It's always a privilege to be asked to do that. In my introduction, what wasn't mentioned is that I'm a person in long-term recovery. What that means to me is I haven't had to use alcohol or other drugs since May of 2013. It means that I'm an asset to my family and to my community. And I share that with you all to be an advocate for other people affected by substance use, people like me, and also family members that are also heavily affected. Thank both of you for sharing your experience. I'll never know what my family went through while I was going through what I was going through. I'm not going to share much about my addiction because all of you know that story. For as long as I remember, I've lived with depression and PTSD. I didn't know it at the time. I didn't know that I was living with anything until I was 20 years old. I just thought that life was hard. And how I dealt with that was using drugs. And I continued to do that. At age 18, I was hit with a baseball bat in my arm, and it was so bad. I remember the surgeon telling me that they had spent multiple hours digging pieces of my elbow out of my arm, and I was given a lot of prescription narcotics, which I had used before, but this time I had a lot of them to use. And as the story goes, within a few months I was injecting heroin. And I did that every day for 2 years. 3 overdoses, 3 attempts at college trying to fix things. 1 move later, I did finally find recovery. I had tried treatment center before. I left after 14 days. I didn't really retain any information, was using within a few hours. I was revived with naloxone 3 times, as I said. I'm grateful that I received all 3 opportunities, because if I did not, I wouldn't be here. Naloxone did save my life. Back then, we didn't have the Good Samaritan law. I was saved by an emergency services professional once, which I'm grateful for. I was revived in the hospital after being dropped off by friends once. And then another time, we didn't yet have access to naloxone, like was said, so what we used to have to do is carry Suboxone around and pray that the buprenorphine wouldn't depress the system enough, or it wouldn't, basically the naloxone would overact both that and the opiates already in the system. So it is really good to have naloxone available to people now. Anyway, since finding recovery, well, let me back up. I was arrested once at the end, and that is what disrupted my use long enough to get into recovery. I want to talk a little bit about that because what happened was I was on my way to Wake County with a friend who had a gram of heroin he was ready to sell to someone. And the person we were selling to was a confidential informant. I was removed from my truck by a SWAT team. I remember very well, and arrested and charged with felonies, which has been somewhat of a challenge, finding recovery, trying to find work, trying to go back to school, trying to do other things. So there's a lot of context we have when we talk about substance use and recovery. I've since finished college. Not only finished college, I finished grad school. I'm employable. I work in High Point with drug users, ensuring their access to naloxone, ensuring their access to treatment. I work with a lot of other professionals in the community, law enforcement, judges, emergency services, other treatment providers, family members, churches. And it truly is an honor to work with so many people. And also, recovery has allowed me to be a caregiver to my parents. My mom was with late-stage Alzheimer's disease. My dad is currently living with leukemia. So I get the opportunity to give them the love that they gave me when I was going through what I was going through. And that's really important to me. And people ask me all the time what I think got me into recovery or made me want to stay in recovery or stop using drugs. And I never have a physical answer. I don't know what it took. I don't know if it was the treatment I received because other people got the same treatment and didn't. I do have an abstract answer, and that answer would be hope. I do believe, like was mentioned earlier, this is a spiritual matter. And I heard someone share earlier about a severed hope line because of a certain stigma that it exists within people living with substance use. I also know that for the last 100 years, our approach to addiction has been interdiction, meaning that we put people in cages based on their substance use, which makes sense, and that's the law, and people are following the law. However, I would contend that it's not been working, and that we do need justice. I believe in restorative justice and public health models, and we do have the ability to solve this crisis. We know that because other countries have, other communities have. There are plenty of approaches that do work. It's just a matter of whether or not we are willing to change the way we look at things and reallocate our resources to do so. Thank you again for this opportunity.
Chase, you back your phone. You know, counties from across North Carolina are having these opioid forums, and I believe the one we're having here in Randolph County today is the largest so far in North Carolina, and I know it was the most comprehensive with the subjects that we covered. And let's give everybody. To sit here and hear the information that's been presented here this morning. I know it's been a long morning, but it doesn't seem like it's been a long morning because everything was so is vital to what we are as a community. And before I turn it over to Chairman Allen, I just want to say too, and I'm looking out at all of you, and I see so many of you that participated in the county strategic planning process. that we recently completed, although it's ongoing. And that's what makes Randolph County different. Last week I was at an Association of County Commissioners meeting down in Durham and interacting with some of my counterparts. And they asked me, how does Randolph County do these things? And I said, well, the first thing we do is strategic planning. We bring the community together and give them an opportunity to talk about issues. And we looked at our health and our safety and our well-being. And so many of these are threads that connect. And what we're talking about this morning is a major thread that goes through all those three areas. So I'm proud of what our strategic plan accomplished, and I'm proud of what all of you did as being part of that. I write this down and I share it with people every chance I get about strategic planning, because all of you here this morning is a good example of this word. When we completed that plan and the commissioners adopted it, a person said, I give a lot of credit to the Board of County Commissioners and to the strategic planning process they endorsed, because it created an atmosphere in Randolph County where it's okay and even beneficial to talk about issues that affect so many lives. And that's what we're doing here today. And we take that for granted in Randolph County. But other places, it's not that way. People ignore issues sometimes. So I thank all of you, and Mr. Chairman, I'll turn it to you. Thank all of you.
I do thank you for hanging in there with us, because I know that the mind can only absorb as much as the bottom can endure. But this has been a very special forum and public meeting. Opiates do not discriminate between urban and rural, between young and old, male, female, black, white, Democrat, Republican. The personal stories we have heard this morning are very heart-wrenching, and the statistics are alarming. All of you, your presence here this morning highlight the concerns and serious impacts that this issue is having on our citizens and the agencies that provide those services. So what is our next step as the Randolph County community? I agree with our county manager that our Randolph County strategic plan has been very beneficial, and our board of directors, our board of commissioners has implemented some of the key strategies, which include commissioning an assessment of Randolph County aimed at improving access to health care, providing support for the public health department's opioid collaborative that addresses education and prevention. We mentioned that here this morning. Providing support for assessments of mental health and substance abuse impacts for our county detention center. We've talked about that. And providing support for the development of the Randolph County Child Advocacy Center that would be the first for Randolph County. But we need to do more. As a community, we need to continue the commitment and the momentum that we've demonstrated here at this meeting this morning. Our Board of County Commissioners, I think we're down to 3, but we're still a quorum, is that not right, Amanda? Is here this morning, and this is a public meeting. So what I would like to do, I'd like to ask the Commissioners if they would like to entertain a motion to establish an opioid collaborative council and direct the county manager and public health director to recommend citizens for this council to be considered for the Commissioners at a later meeting. Is there a second? We're good there. This council would then be charged with the responsibility of making specific recommendations to the county commissioners by the spring of 2018 concerning actions to address the issues that we've talked about here this morning. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll vote. All those in favor? Aye. That's unanimous. I would like to thank our speakers this morning. Appreciate all that you have done and all the preparation you put into it. And thank you for attending and this forum this morning. I trust that each of you are a little bit more educated than we were when we came in, that we can take that back to our communities and apply it there. So thank you for coming. We do appreciate your time. Thank you very much.